Yeah, hi guys. Good morning, everyone. Uh, Welcome to the program EACT. Today we have a speaker, Mr. Abhijeet Gurjar. He's a drug safety officer at Pfizer. He has done his B Pharm and then M Pharm, MBA in Pharma Management from NMIMS. He has over 6.5 years of work experience with pharmacovigilance, and he has been previously associated with some of the top brands like TCS, Alchem, Johnson and Johnson. The first session for today is by Mr. Gurjar, and he's going to guide us about the job profiles, the growth prospects, the eligibility criteria, and the interview skills in pharmacovigilance. Abhijeet, if you could please take over the session. Just give me a moment, Abhijeet. I'll need to give you the controls.
Uh,
Yeah, you
am I
can share.
audible now?
Yeah, you can share your screen as well, Abhijeet.
Okay, sure. Thank you. Okay, so good morning, all of us. Thank you for coming for this session. So, this session is going to be more sort of short and crisp. I am not going to go too deep into each and every aspect topic, and to speak on every aspect would take a lot of time. However, I would try to touch on each and every point which would be useful for you in your career initiation. So, what exactly is pharmacology? Basically defined as the pharmacological science that is relating to the collection of the data. When I say collection of the data, it basically means when the product is in the market, at that point of time, what are the side effects that the patients are experiencing due to the product. These adverse events are getting collected, they are getting further processed. So that is what is known as a collection, in which we receive the information from the literature articles that are getting published. The spontaneous reports. Now, spontaneous reports are those reports which we receive from the healthcare professional, that is one of our major stakeholders, consumers or patients. Those are again a major stakeholder for us. Lawyers and regulatory authorities. Next is the study or the post marketing surveillance data. And the final is the study or the post marketing. It means any study that post marketing surveillance would be obviously when the product is in the market. So, since the patient pool during the clinical trial phase the product is in the market, receive more cases or more side effects or more adverse post marketing surveillance data. And the final is our regulatory reports. When I say regulatory reports, it's the reports that we receive from the health authority. For India, standard control organization. Likewise, for each and every country, we have respective health authorities who work parallelly to collect all this data and to process it further. Also, there is another option which I have mentioned over here is follow-up data. Follow-up data means basically when we are receiving the initial adverse event information from any of our stakeholders, at that point of time, to process this data further to get a better understanding of what exactly is this side effect or adverse event about, or what has happened to the patient, we follow up with these stakeholders. For example, if a side effect or an adverse event is received from a healthcare professional, then we need to address him back, asking for more information about the patient's recovery, whether the drug that was ongoing at that point of time is still ongoing or not, or it has been stopped, or is there any other medication that patient is taking instead of our medication. what is the condition, is it severe, if the patient is completely fine now, or is he recovering. So all sort of these conditions are there in follow up data. Once we receive this data, it is processed into a database. Now these databases are different as per the companies. However, currently a worldwide global safety database which is followed by most of the companies is Argus safety database. Now also there are many versions of this Argus safety database. It is a system wherein all the information received has been inputted, and then once it has been into the database, it is further processed. Once it has been processed, then it goes for the detection and assessment level. Now in detection and assessment level, what they assess actually is, for a product, how many adverse events have been reported in a particular period of time. Is this data actually variant, or some kind of adverse event is repetitive for one particular product? If it is repetitive, then what needs to be done? That comes into the monitoring phase. So there are many aspects in output or monitoring phase. First is, once a data is processed in the whole database, it gets reported to the regulatory health authority. Now, while reporting to the health authority, there are several forms, or I would say several ways in which the health authority accepts this report. Again, it varies from the health authority to health authority. For example, United States health authority, which is US FDA, it receives a electronic format of the report, whereas for India, the Indian Health Authority wants the data in a SIOMS format. Now, I won't go deep into what exactly SIOMS format. However, just remember one word about SIOMS. It might be asked during your interviews. Next is the response to inquiry. Now, response to inquiry itself means coming back to the follow up data, asking for more data from the patient. Even though the initial data or the initial information has been processed, we require more information from our sources, from the one who have actually processed the whole information and forwarded to us. Next is signal generation. Now, signal generation is very important step in the whole pharmacovigilance system, because this is where the actual decision is made whether a particular side effect is really making a difference in the benefit and risk ratio of the product. If the risk of the product is more as compared to the benefit of the product, then the product is ideally removed from the market, or there are certain changes that the company has to make in either of their labels. The label is the leaflet, the package insert leaflet that we get in the product when we buy the product, or else the product has to be withdrawn. So these are certain steps that are taken. Finally, these all steps are taken to prevent any sort of complaints on our product. Now, keep in mind there can be no product which does not have any side effect. Every product has some side effect or the other. However, it depends on the benefit and the risk ratio of that product, whether it needs to be in the market, or there needs to be certain changes in the product which can increase its benefit profile comparing it to the risk profile. Now, what exactly are these complaints? So, complaints are basically divided into three types. First is adverse event, second is product quality complaint, and third is combination of these both, adverse event and product quality complaint. So I would like to give you an example over here. Consider a patient who is taking paracetamol for headache. Now this is a very simple example to understand. Headache becomes an indication of the product. Paracetamol itself is a company product. Now when the patient consumes the product, at that point of time, if he gets any side effect, say maybe he's experiencing weakness or fatigue. Now weakness or fatigue becomes the side effect or the adverse event due to the product paracetamol. Moving to the next step, now coming to product quality complaint. Consider again the same example if I'm taking, when the patient purchased paracetamol from a pharmacist. At that point of time, he sees that the tablet was broken, or maybe there was discoloration. The ideal tablet should have been white, but when he removed the tablet from the strip, he found that it was pale yellow, or there were dots on the tablet. That makes it a product quality complaint. Now, this product quality complaint also gets reported to the company who is actually making the product. Now, if the patient is consuming that product, that faulty product, then it falls into the third criteria, which is a combination of an adverse event and product quality complaint. So if a patient is consuming a faulty product and then he experiences certain side effects, again coming back to weakness or fatigue, then this is a combination where he needs to mention when he's reporting to the company that I purchased this product, the product was faulty, I consumed it and I got a side effect. Why this combination needs to be mentioned is because if you are reporting, or if we get reported only about an adverse event, it will stick to the pharmacovigilance department only. However, if there is a product quality complaint, then a quality assurance team comes into picture and they have to work together to move ahead. Next is about major stakeholders. So for us, the major stakeholders are obviously the patients, are end at the end who is receiving the product, or the consumers. I've mentioned consumers because there is a purpose behind this. If there is a consumer product, then we do not call them patients. For example, if Johnson's products are being used by the babies, then we do not call them patients, we call them consumers. Whereas in pharma, it is particularly patients. Next is social media. So each company have their own social media pages about their products. They get a lot of comments from the healthcare professionals or from the other stakeholders, from the patients directly on those links. So again, we need to analyze those comments and we further processes in case if there is any side effect or adverse event mentioned in them. Next is again healthcare professionals. Internal stakeholders. Now, internal stakeholders mean each and every employee who is associated with the company needs to be trained on this pharmacovigilance profile, needs to be trained on reporting of adverse event if in case they come across any on the company product. Then there can be the actual employees, the contractors, the internal stakeholders, all are included in them. Then comes the licensing or marketing partners. So some the term what we call in pharmacovigilance is good practices in case of sharing the data to and fro. For example, if there are two companies who are into pharmacovigilance and one company receives a side effect about a product which is ideally marketed by another company, then it is their responsibility to share that information with the next company so that both the companies are made aware about this information. Also, if there is a marketing partner, we train those marketing partners. For example, a giant company like J&J have many small marketing partner companies, which are Indian companies, for example. So it is responsibility of J&J to train the employees of the small companies on how the data needs to be provided or submitted to them. Then comes the vendors. Now, vendors can include manufacturers, carrying and forwarding agents, suppliers. These everyone are again trained on the reporting criteria. Final is, and the most important, I would say, is regulatory authority. Regulatory authority in India, I have seen a huge change in last 3 to 4 years, wherein they have come up with very stringent guidelines for reporting of adverse events, especially for the companies which are MNCs, I would say. There are many aspects that they are looking into, and it is a good thing because that has made more awareness in the country itself for the companies to make the major stakeholders let them know that this is what the regulatory authority has come up with and we need more information from them. Now, this slide I have added just because to let you know that the whole clinical trial phases, like all the phases which are starting from the preclinical phase to the post-marketing phase, everywhere pharmacovigilance interrupts whenever there is any trial that is going on the patients or the animals also. If there is any side effects on that, that gets reported. Now coming to the growth aspect in a pharmacovigilance or drug safety profile. So drug safety profile is one of the most lucrative career in today's world. There are more than 30,000 jobs available in the market and it is increasing. This is the data from Indeed. Now, I have been speaking on pharmacovigilance. Now, there are two other aspects into vigilance as such as well, which is cosmetovigilance and material vigilance. So, cosmetovigilance is basically about the cosmetic products. uh, this is still in the upcoming phase, the growing phase. The guidelines are not completely known to everyone, and it is not completely flourished also, just as pharmacovigilance is. However, it is a booming profile. Next is material vigilance. Material vigilance is for medical devices. So you must be knowing about several medical devices like knee replacement, what happens, or other medical devices that are available in the market from the MNC companies like Johnson and Johnson or Pfizer. So these medical devices are also creating side effects, due to which the health authority is coming up with material vigilance, somewhat like pharmacovigilance. So this is another profile which is booming now and would be of great interest for you people if in case you wish to enter into this market. Next is increasing regulatory compliance. Increasing regulatory compliance demands maintenance of safety of each marketed product for every pharmaceutical company. Constant expansion of the pharma industry due to new products entering in the market. So obviously, the each and every company is competitive. They want to grow, and best example is the COVID-19, the current situation that is going on now. Hydroxychloroquine is the drug which has been used currently in the beginning of the COVID, which was assumed to have positive effects in COVID-19. However, there have been several side effects that were reported due to consumption of hydroxychloroquine in patients, and there have been huge number of adverse events that got reported in these couple of months. Now, you can assume if such side effect or if such disease come into the market, what would be the utilization of our department, and the growth or the importance of our department comes into the picture over here. Next point is regulatory authorities are constantly striving, as I earlier mentioned, they are constantly striving to safeguard the public health, striking a fine balance between the benefits and of the drugs and varying levels of potential risk, making drug safety and pharmacovigilance mandatory. So earlier, what used to happen was, maybe I would say 6 to 8 years down the line, previously, the thing was that not all companies were having the PV department. Certain companies used to take their hands up, saying that it won't be applicable for us, or maybe they would say we do not have that much capacity to have such a department in the company. However, now the scenario is completely changed. For every company, the health authority has made it mandatory to have a particular department which is working towards the safety of the patients. Hello, am I audible?
Yeah, Abhijeet, you're audible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So, on the right hand side, you can see pharmacovigilance market size by clinical trial phase. So, in 2000, around 2000 trials that were going on, which has now increased to more than 5,000 trials in the market that has been going. So, for each trial, there are reported. So if there are 5,000, then imagine the amount of data that these Next is the various functionaries or the titles in the drug fields in the pharmaceutical industry, which allows you to work in both the core pharmaceutical companies as well as vendor companies, like the knowledge process outsourcing companies. I will speak on them on the next slide. Now, speaking about the job titles in drug safety. So, for the freshers, it would be these particular titles that you would be entitled with: drug safety associate or data analyst or drug safety associate. Again, it would be depending on company to company how they want to give the title or the job description. However, these are the general terms that can be given by the companies for the freshers. Once you have the proper experience, you would be given these titles, and there is a lot of responsibility for these titles. When I say QPPV, for example, qualified person of pharmacovigilance is only that person who has at least 10 to 15 years of experience in pharmacy, in pharmacovigilance, and who has worked in almost all aspects. Again, drug safety officer. Now, for being a safety officer, obviously you require 8 to 10 years of experience. These are various other profiles which I won't go deep into. Just to give you a picture that this can be the starting role or the starting job title for you when you join or when you wish to enter into the PV market. Now, just one point over here to look after is the medical information specialist role. Now, this role is something which is a branch of pharmacovigilance, I would say. Medical information is basically when there is information that you receive from the healthcare professional again, but then it is not particularly applicable for the medical information associate. This information is applicable for drug safety. So if there is any adverse event particularly mentioned, then only this department forwards the information to us. However, I have seen people entering from medical information department into PV department, or likewise changing from this department to that department. So I would say they are in a way interlinked. That's why I've mentioned this role as well. Next, coming to the job description. Now, I have given a huge job description. There would be hardly 4 or 5 points from this job description that would be mentioned for the initial role. So I will just cover the major points over here. One is the reporting requirements. So keep in mind, whenever you are applying for any role, just go thoroughly through the job description and understand that for which health authority the company is working for. If it's for US, if it's a US based company, and if they are working for US FDA, or if they are reporting to UK Health Authority or European Health Authority or Indian Health Authority, obviously that would be mentioned in the job description. So if they have mentioned likewise, then you need to be thorough with the reporting requirements, because that can be one of the important questions that can be asked. Also, it would be your daily day-to-day task that you need to follow. Second is the becoming a liaison between the company and the patients or healthcare experts. So now this particular point is when you working in a core company. uh, in a core company, it's more sort of like making the stakeholders aware about their responsibility of reporting, also asking them for data, and side by side we are informing the patients that what exactly are the conditions of the side effects due to the products that they are consuming. So for example, there are patient assistance programs. You might have come across this term. Patient assistance program is where the patients are given the products at a lower cost, and then they are actually seen the way they are responding to those products, and the adverse events are getting reported. Now these programs are run by the the pharmaceutical companies itself. So this data also helps a lot. Also, when we are doing this PAP program, what we call patient assistance program, we literally tell patients about the side effects about this product, and we request them, in case if they come across the side effects, to report it to us. So that is again becoming a liaison between the patients and the company. Third is working on the global safety database. As I mentioned earlier, Argus is one of the database. This is a very basic and the most important step. case triaging, medical coding, data entry, and narrative writing. This is the entry level work that you will have to do on the global safety database. Utilization of skills for assessing the seriousness and causality relationship between the pharmaceutical products and adverse events. So adverse event, whenever it gets reported, it might not be the actual outcome of the product. So, for example, as I mentioned that the example which I gave regarding paracetamol. So, when the patient took paracetamol, he experienced fatigue. Now, it might not be a possibility that fatigue was due to paracetamol. It can be due to other reasons. So, to have this relationship between the product and the side effect that has happened, it would be your responsibility. Next is conducting regular pharmacovigilance development and supervising these processes. So this is a very wide term. I won't go deep into this. Tracking errors in the safety data. So whenever the data is processed in the Argus system at that point of time, in case if you come across any errors, then done by the new associates, then these errors are looked into, they are tracked, they are analyzed, corrective and preventive actions are taken against that. Then training plans. Now, this is another important point which is taken into consideration. So there are trainings. It's completely a training department which works under pharmacovigilance departments, which goes and trains the internal stakeholders or the new associates. Next point is reporting SAEs to the health authority in proposed stringent timeline. So this is again another important point. Whichever data or whichever adverse event is getting reported to the company, it needs to get reported to the health authority within a stipulated timeline. If it is not reported to the health authority or if it is reported late to the health authority, there can be serious actions that can be taken by the health authority against the company. Uh, Next point is attending several meetings or conferences. So this is another point which is for the higher management. Next is regarding the additional certain points which I want to go into. For example, the average pay scale of pharmacovigilance professionals. So I've mentioned over here the other countries' average pay scale as well, because if in case you wish to move abroad in the future and if you wish to pursue your career in PV as well over there, then to give you an idea about what can be the entry level average scale, or after 6 or 4 years of experience, what would be this pay scale. However, if I'm talking about India, this would be the average scale. Now, please keep in mind that this is a normal figure which I have given. It can vary at a wide extent. Next, qualification and minimum eligibility criteria. So, pharmacy graduate is a must for entering into this field. Freshers or experience. Again, if you are masters in pharmacology, then that is a good point. It is an added advantage, I would say. Certification on pharmacovigilance or drug safety. Now, this is ideally not compulsion. I would suggest not to take this if in case you are a proper um, uh, if you have a proper understanding about normal pharmacology subject during your pharmacy course, you don't need to take this certification courses at all. However, if you feel that you want to excel more in your career in a way that you want to give your best at the initial stage itself, which is ideally, I would say, anyways, you would be trained if in case you're getting selected in the company. But then if you wish to have this certification course, you can go ahead, but then this is not a compulsion. I would say these 2 points are extremely important. Next is skill sets. So basic knowledge to work with the computers. MS Office knowledge is important, especially the Excel sheet, the PowerPoint presentations. These two things are important. Quality learning aptitude to get trained in your software application tools like Oracle Argus Safety. So there are various safety databases for which you have to show interest in getting trained. That is another point. Then willing and ready to acquaint with changing regulatory landscape in pharmacovigilance. Good communication skills. This is the most important thing, and legal and regulatory knowledge. As I mentioned again, the regulatory rules that needs to be, you need to be thorough with it, and it changes time to time. So you have to be uh, well understanding that for each and every time you need to be um, able to know what exactly are the current rules or the regulations that the health authorities have come up with. Now, hierarchy in the department. So, as I earlier mentioned, that PV is a role which is in pharmaceutical companies as well as in the CROs or KPOs. So, I have given the hierarchy in both the organizations, I would say. Also, you can interchange between any of these companies anytime you wish to. So, for pharmaceutical companies, the hierarchy goes like this. Initial stage would be safety data coordinator, safety data management specialist, senior safety data management specialist, safety officer, and country lead. Now, country lead is someone who is handling the whole global PV for the Asia Pacific region, and under him, these are the titles which come. If I move to the KPOs or CROs, so I've given certain examples of the KPOs. TCS, Cognizant, these are the well-known companies. IQVIA, another good company. Cyphomix. Now, for over here, the again, I would say the title changes from company to company. Some would give trainee associate, some would give junior data analyst. Likewise, with as you gain experience, you would become more and more experienced about the role. You would move to the next stage, would be drug safety associate or safety data analyst, team lead, group lead, and project lead. Now, as over here, the country safety lead is likewise this role is of project lead, where he handles the whole project, including all these team members. Uh, Project lead is also a role which is like you would be sitting over here as well as you can move abroad. So that is also a good thing. For you to understand trainee associate role and safety data coordinator role, these two roles are your entering phase into this particular profile. Coming to the frequently asked questions. So I have mentioned a lot of questions over here. I won't say that all the questions would be asked at the entry level. However, I would try to do the best what I am about. Except for these questions, I won't think that there would be anything that can be asked to you. First of all, this question is an open-ended question. The interviewer may ask you, "What exactly do you know about drug safety?" Whatever you are aware about, you can directly speak about it. Next, this question is 100% pharmacovigilance. You people tend to give the definition, but I would suggest try avoiding giving any definition. Just explain in basic language that it is any side effect, and then the further processing of the safety information or the side effect or the adverse event that has been reported. That would be more catchy because the interviewer would know what is the crunch and what is the actually behind this PV department, rather than just knowing the language mentioned in the book. Then, what is adverse event, adverse drug reaction, or suspected unexpected serious adverse reaction? So, I'll just explain in a bit over on this. So, adverse event, as I mentioned, is patient experiencing some side effect when he consumes the product. That becomes an adverse event. Adverse drug reaction is something which is when you decide after giving the causal relationship between the product and the event. When you say that a patient experienced certain side effect due to our product, that point of time becomes an adverse drug reaction. And suspected unexpected serious adverse reaction is something which was during the clinical trial phase of the product. If in case we do not come across certain side effects, that becomes an unexpected side effect for us when the product is in the market. So that, and if this side effect is serious, then it becomes a suspected unexpected serious adverse event. For you to know these two terms is important. This term, even if you are not aware, is completely fine because these are the two terms that would be asked in your interview, and you would be asked what is the relationship or what is the difference between these two. As I mentioned, in adverse drug reaction, it is the causal relationship that plays a major role. If you are able to justify that there is a relationship between the product and the event, that it becomes, that time itself it becomes an adverse drug reaction. Then clinical trial, what are the phases of clinical trial, and uh, where exactly is PV interrupted? So this is a very interesting question that is asked generally. That you would be first asked what are the phases of clinical trials, and then you would be asked, okay, pharmacovigilance is applicable in which phases of trials. So for here, your answer should be that each and every phase of the trial, PV is applicable. ICH GCP guidelines. So these are the safety guideline, efficacy guideline, quality guideline, multidisciplinary guideline. So this all stuff you would be getting on online. So I'm not going deep into this. Regulatory authority bodies, as I mentioned earlier, just go through the job description and understand that the company is working for which regulatory authority, and you need to be thorough with what are the authorities working for which country. For example, Canada, it is Health Canada. US FDA. UK, it is MHRA. EU, it is EMA, which is European Medicines Agency. So all this thing again you would be getting online. If you are going to work for Indian Health Authority, then these two questions are mandatory. What is Drug and Cosmetic Act and Schedule Y? And what is Pharmacovigilance Program of India? Next question is about the MEDRA, WHODD, Company Drug Dictionary, and IM list. This question is not applicable for entry level. Once you have a couple of years of experience, then this question will come into picture. Minimal criteria for considering the ICSR or individual's case safety report valid. So now, an adverse event, when it gets reported, there are criterias which we consider for making any case to enter into the database. This we call as the minimal criteria or minimal mandatory criteria for making any side effect or adverse event that gets reported a proper case report. So there are four criteria which we generally consider: the patient, obviously, who is reporting the event; the reporter, for example, if the patient has reported the adverse event to the healthcare professional, and a healthcare professional is reporting the information to us, then for us, the patient is the one who is fulfilling the criteria of the patient information. The reporter, it would be the healthcare professional, suspect product, our company product, and the adverse event that the patient has experienced. So these are the four criteria. Again, this question is less likely to be asked at the initial phase, but yes, if you are going for an interview into a core pharma company, then this question might be asked. Um, Again, now these are your personal questions, like questions about your college projects or thesis or internship, what you have done, mechanism of action of any drug that you have come across, and if you want to speak about any of them, name different types of systems in the human body. Now this is also a question which may be asked, may not be asked. So just be aware about what are the systems in the human body, and what are your strengths and weaknesses. So this is a question which is obviously asked at every stage of your life, irrespective of your experience. So be thorough with it, especially at your entry level. So these are general interview questions that one can come across during his initial stage of interview. So that was from my end. Any question and question?
Yeah,
Hello.
Abhijeet. Hello, Abhijeet. Yeah.
Yeah, I will do.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for the information, Abhijeet. We have a few questions from the viewers.
Okay.
The first question is you have already mentioned this term called cosmetovigilance. So
Mm-hmm.
the question is, are there any specific companies who offer this cosmetovigilance job profile?
Uh, Specific companies, so if you are looking from the vendor perspective, then the
Abhijit, your voice is breaking.
pharmaceutical companies who are
Abhijit?
hello.
Yeah, your voice is
Yeah,
breaking.
am I audible now?
Uh,
Am I audible now?
yeah, better.
Okay. So I was saying that, for example, the products, the cosmetic products that are made by the company, for example, L'Oreal or other FMCG companies or other companies who are working on cosmetic products, they would be coming up with this profile. As of now, I haven't heard that any vendor company having cosmetovigilance. So when I say vendor company, these companies are basically whom the pharmacovigilance department is outsourced. For example, if I'm talking about TCS has been outsourced many company PV departments, right from the huge companies like Bayer or Johnson and Johnson also, or other companies. So they outsource certain parts of their PV department. Also, for cosmetovigilance, I would say the guidelines have not completely been set up for the current phase, or I would say current time. But yeah, they are under the phase of preparation and finally coming out. So that's why I said that this can be a booming career in the future as well. Yeah.
Thank you. And there's one more question. You mentioned something about drug safety triage.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So the question is,
So
what is the role of a drug safety triage officer?
okay. So the triage officer role, I would just go back these aspects, the data entry. So now what happened is, earlier there was nothing known as triage, but when the data has increased significantly in these years, the data entry point itself have been bifurcated into entry. So triaging, I would say, is the most basic step, wherein all the data that has been collected from the from our reporters or from our stakeholders, at the initial stage itself, the screening of that data is done by the triaging team, whether adverse event is actually to be considered as an adverse event or not. If it is considered as an adverse event, actually it is valid or not. When I say valid, again, it comes under four criteria, that is patient information is received, reporter information is received, drug information is received, the adverse event is mentioned. If these criteria are mentioned or not, once that is made sure by the triaging officer, and after which only the data goes further for the data entry process. So that is the initial role of the triaging.
Okay. Thank you, Abhijit. There's one more question.
Yeah.
A student has asked if there is a choice between a B farm and an M farm to a candidate. What would be the preference of the company? And in case if both are opting for the same post, is there any difference in their salaries?
Okay, good question. Regarding salaries, yeah, there will be a difference. I won't say a much difference at the initial stage, but again, I would say that if you're considering about the salary part, where a person who has done B farm, he might be 21 years old. A person who has done M farm, he might be 23 years old or whatever. So the M farm person has already grown 2 years older for that position if he's entering into that position. So if he is earning little bit more, that's acceptable. Now, coming to the first part of the question about any consequences of coming to an interview for the same role by M farm and B farm, I would say that nowadays companies are taking B farms more as compared to M farm, specifically for this role. The reason behind this is obviously that the initial 3-4 months your training is done by the M farm, whether you are a B farm, whether you are an M farm, irrespective. So what now companies are having this in mind is, if we are taking a B farm, obviously it will be cost effective as compared to M farm students. This is specifically, I'm talking about the vendor companies. Likewise, on the other hand, if I say about the proper pharma companies, then they might take the M farm students more as compared to B farm students. But then this also finally depends upon the hiring team, what they want, or what for which role they are looking for. If they are looking for a drug safety associate role, a proper drug safety associate role, they might look for an MPharm. But if they are looking for a drug safety coordinator role, like the initial triaging step or the data entry step, they might look for BPharm students, because they also see that what is the job description and whether the person is overqualified or not. Sometimes M-Pharm is considered as overqualification for a particular role, for which B-Pharm is the proper qualification. Yeah.
Thank you, Abhijit. We have a couple of more questions. I hope you don't mind. Uh, the
Hello.
next question, yeah,
Um,
Abhijit.
yeah, yeah, sure.
Yeah. The next question, you have already covered
Mhm.
this part actually in one of your slides, but the question is still there. Uh, is a diploma in
Mhm.
pharmacovigilance mandatory for this job profile? Uh, anything apart from the B Farm or the primary qualification, is diploma in pharmacovigilance mandate?
I what I understand is any term as diploma in pharmacovigilance. Certain students do those because their whole and soul is that they want to enter into this field no matter what. So I would say that having a certification might increase your chance of getting into the role by 0.5% or by max 1%, but that at all is not compulsory, or that won't have that much upper hand. If you are, as I earlier mentioned, if you are quite clear about your whole pharmacy career, the 4 years knowledge you have, the basic knowledge you have, especially in pharmacology subject that you come across in your 4 years study, if you are quite aware about what exactly is into pharmacology, then it is more than enough. As I mentioned in my questions also, they might ask you about your different the body systems. That can be a question uniquely from your graduation career. Apart from that, there won't be much questions related to the pharmacy also, nor from the certification also. If you're doing certification, it basically means they are going to give you the same knowledge what I gave you just now, maybe in depth little bit, but that won't make any much difference as per it's my personal belief that I've come across. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Abhijit. And there's one more question, which
Mm-hmm.
is can BSc graduates apply for this post?
Okay. So back, like I would say, when I started my career in pharmacovigilance, at that point of time BSc students were taken. Obviously they were taken at that point of time, but now I would say I don't feel that they have taken any more, at least not in the core companies. Maybe in the vendor companies they might be taken, but I would say the chances are very less. Obviously in core companies they are not at all taken, unless those BSc students have prior experience of working in PV, but as a fresher they won't be taken into this. Yep.
Okay, Abhijit, thank you so much. I think that's the last question we have had. Thank you so much, Abhijit, for your informative
Great.
session.
Sure, thank
I'm
you.
sure the students had a lot to learn from this. Guys, we'll be waiting for we'll be taking a short break of 5 to 7 minutes, and then we'll be starting with the next session, which is on quality assurance and quality control. So I hope you guys can join in once again, or just stay connected. We'll be starting the session soon. Thank you so much, Abhijit, once again.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, hi, Forum. Forum, you there? Hello, Forum.
Hello.
Yeah, Forum. Can you hear?
Hello.
Yes, Forum. Hi, you're there? Can you
Yes,
hear properly?
can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
All right.
Yeah,
How do
just give me a minute. I'll just introduce and then we can start the session. The students are already waiting.
All right.
Okay. So thank you so much, guys. We shall resume our session. The next session we have is Miss Forum Jalundhwala Gandhi. She's a QA manager at Shreenath Chemicals. She has done her bachelor's of pharmacy from Bombay College of Pharmacy, then her master's from NMIMS. She's a gold medalist in QA. She's now the PhD scholar at NMIMS. She has over 5 years of work experience in QA/QC. She's also an active member of the Indian Pharmaceutical Federation at the Industry Pharmacy section. So the session we have right now is to know about the job profile, the growth, the eligibility criteria, and the interview skills in quality control and quality assurance. Forum, all over to you. If you would like to screen.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, Forum.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Forum, you're audible. If you would like to share your screen. Yeah.
Yes. Uh, Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the E-Act QA session. I hope you've had already an energetic morning with the E-Act and welcoming you back for the QA session. In this lockdown, you must have heard a lot about, let's say, for an example, vegetable shopping. How do you pick up vegetables? Have you been there? Have you experienced? What is the thing you see? Color, freshness, it's basically the quality, right? So when I say about quality of everything around us matters the most because quality impacts a health and we are healthcare professionals. So Quality is the most important element, right from non-living to living things. Quality of our bed sheet, of our furniture, of our gadgets, of our vegetables, everything is important. So quality assurance is nothing but assuring the quality of every product. It need not be only pharma. Quality of your car, quality of your bicycle, everything is just important. If there is no quality, first of all, the customer will not buy it. Secondly, if it is appealing and they buy it and there is no quality, they will never recommend or rebuy it. So that just gives you a gist of this session, how important quality assurance will be, especially being a healthcare professional and serving the public health sector. So welcoming you all to quality assurance session by me, Forum Gandhi, QA manager at Shreenath Chemicals. As you can read, I have put a tagline that quality assurance is nothing but a tastemaker to your medicine. What do you mean by a tastemaker to your medicine? Salt is a tastemaker to your food. Any food without salt is bland. The salt is the perfect combination or the fine line defining the taste of your food. Same way, quality assurance is the fine line defining the quality of your medicine. Everyone makes a paracetamol tablet, but it's the quality assurance person who will define or justify how better your paracetamol tablet is compared to any other paracetamol tablet. So this gives you a gist again, the importance of quality assurance in our medicines. What we discussed earlier was quality assurance importance in our life. And here I'm giving you more depth of the importance of quality assurance in our medicines. So welcoming you once again to the session, what to expect in this session. Firstly, I'll let you know who am I, like my brief introduction. What is a QA department? Where all will you find a QA department? Who can be part of a QA department? Where you'll know what are the roles, responsibilities, what are the skills required to be a QA person or a part of any QA department. Lastly, we will also see how to be part of QA department. As this E-Act emphasizes, I'll be giving you a gist or a guidance to prepare for the interviews aimed for QA department. So this is just a brief outline of our session today. Starting with who am I? This is just brief timeline of my certifications and qualifications. I completed my B.Pharm from Bombay College of Pharmacy in 2013. I completed my M.Pharm in quality assurance. I'm a gold medalist in 2015 from NMIMS, that's SPP School of Pharmacy and Technology Management. I then also did my certified lead auditor course for ISO 9001-2015 in 2015 itself. So after completing my M.Pharm, I joined Shreenath Chemicals as a QA manager, and I also did a certificate course side by. This course is nothing but a 1-week course. It gives you knowledge of all quality management systems, which I'll be explaining you further. The certificate lets you audit some facility, and this being an ISO certificate, it is more generalized and not only pharma related. And I joined directly as a manager because Shreenath Chemicals is a small scale company, so they have a hierarchy accordingly. With my qualification and background, they selected me as a QA manager. So that was till 2015. Since 5 years, I have been working. There was a big transition in between in 2018, where I joined a PhD program. It is an industry-sponsored program, again from NMIMS. Industry-sponsored program means I'm doing my research in the industry where I'm working, but providing my thesis and publication through a university. So basically, I'm not going to college daily for my research work. I'm conducting my research along with my job work at Shreenath Chemicals. But I do submit my progress report and thesis to my college. And that's how I'll get a PhD degree. So currently in 2020, which is in yellow, I'm a PhD scholar. I'm a QA manager. I am also Associate Executive Committee member at FIP IPS. Let me clarify, there are a lot of short forms used in my presentation because that's how QA works. I would like, if you have to note down something, please Google the full forms or contact me anytime. So FIP IPS, FIP is one of the oldest international pharma body. I am part of its industrial pharmacy section as an associate executive member. What we do is we have monthly teleconference meetings and we provide guidance documents, some question answer feedbacks, some webinar series, newsletters to all the industrial pharmacists all around the world. Next, I'm a member of IPA MSB industry chapter. I am sure most of you all know what IPA is. It's Indian Pharmaceutical Association. We have started an industry chapter, and again, we conduct workshops and seminar webinar series. I'm editor of Shreenath Pharma magazine. This is a magazine recently started like a year ago for bridging the gap between academics and industries. We basically provide articles where there is knowledge sharing of research and activities conducted in colleges as well as industries. So this is introduction of who am I. Coming to the next main part, what is QA? Initially, I explained you quality assurance is everything around us. Then I explained you quality assurance is a tastemaker for our medicines. Now coming deeper to the pharmaceutical industry, quality assurance is nothing but technical administration. How do you define technical administration? Administration is more of documentation work, either hard copy or soft copy. It's collecting documents, reviewing documents, approving documents from various departments. And when I say it's technical administration, it is documents which contain all technical details. It's not accounts, it's technical details. So that's the difference between a regular administration and technical administration. QA is a person who is not involved in labs, who is not involved on the shop floor. Shop floor is nothing but the production site. So QA is a person sitting in an office, just like a sales marketing person, in front of computer or in front of all piles of pages, but he is reviewing only technical details. He's not reviewing any accounts or balance sheets. So QA again is more like a white collar job where you are not into the lab, but you know everything what is going on in the lab. So QA again, there are also terms used like CQA, which is corporate QA. Corporate QA is one head office running the quality management system and providing certain documents to all its branches, that is different manufacturing sites. And only QA may be a corporate QA or something which is locally available, that is at the shop floor or in the lab. So coming to the deepest definition of quality assurance, it's a technical administrative job. Giving you a gist of what is the difference of campus to corporate, that is institutional to industrial QA. You all have gone through an element of quality assurance in your institute. Now, I will just help you correlate what is the same quality assurance work in industry, how is it reflected? When I have taken examples of institutional quality assurance, this is more like any research work. Most of y'all in BPharm have not done a hardcore research, but I'm sure you all know what an MPharm student is doing. So in an institute, a student does a research work. That is either you as an undergrad or MPharm students are doing research work independently. So you are performing all the experiments, may it be extraction, may it be synthesis, may it be analysis, anything, but it's you as a student doing research work. Same way in an industry, a chemist or a person who is hired as an analyst will be performing the testing or controlling the manufacturing processes in an industry. So a student is correlated to a chemist in the industry. In the institute, a professor, that is your sir, teacher, guide, advisor, however you name it, a professor assures the work is done as planned. So when you are doing a lab work, Your professor will tell you what is the aim of the experiment, what is the procedure. So that is planned by them, and you are conducting the work as per plan, which is observed by them. Same way in industry, it is the QA officer or the QA department which ensures that the task is performed as planned. For example, it's the QA officer who will give you testing method, which is known as standard testing procedure or standard operating procedure, and QA officer will be providing these procedures to the analyst or chemist and ensuring that the person is performing as the protocol or as per the procedure. So that's how this is correlated. Coming to the next part, in the institute, whatever you have worked, it is proof that your work is good when you publish it in a scientific journal. So that's how it is recorded. In your undergrad level, it is recorded in your own journals. In post-graduation level, it is recorded as a publication or thesis. In industry, everything is recorded in various documents, which are known as either reports or protocols or records, etc. Depending on what testing you are doing, they have its own set of documents where it is recorded. So this is the comparison of how it is proved what work you have done. Coming to the last part of institution, everything that is done is peer-reviewed. Committee reviews this work. So when you are publishing, even in your college, you will have a committee of research committee who will review whatever the work was done, planned, etc. In your undergrad level, you might have something like Viva periodically, who will approve that whatever you've done, whatever you've understood is qualified. Same way in industry, a regulatory body will come periodically and review all the activities that you have done. So as an institute, your external will come and see your journal and ensure that whatever you've done in the whole year or semester is qualified. Same way in an industry, a regulatory body person, that is a drug inspector, would come and review all your documents and ensure whatever you've done in that interval was ethical and qualified. So I hope this clarifies your idea about quality assurance between an institute and industry. So quality assurance in our life is nothing new. As I had explained earlier, we pick up quality products in our day-to-day life. Same way we pick up quality products in our medicines. Being a healthcare professional, now it's our turn to impart that quality in the medicine. We have been working as a QA person in institute. We can also be working as a QA person in the industry. There's nothing new, it's just the new look of it. Now, where is a QA department found? Is it only in analytical testing labs? Is it only in manufacturing sites? Is it only in clinical trials? Only R&Ds or only marketing? No. QA is one role which fits all. So QA is a department where you will find everywhere. If it's a manufacturing site, you'll find a QA department. If it's a standalone testing laboratory, you will find a QA department. If it's a clinical trial place, you will find a QA department. You will find a QA department in only R&D sections also. Even in marketing, there are quality systems required. Everywhere, the more systematic you are, the more quality you will produce, and hence QA department is most important in the pharma sector. Now, role of a QA department. I have picked up three main sections, that is R&D, clinical trials, and manufacturing. If there is a QA department in R&D, you will have activities like documenting whatever you've done, auditing the development stages, and validating the scale-ups. In clinical trials, again, documenting the activities, auditing the activities, and in manufacturing, again, it's documentation, auditing, and validation. As you can see the gist, main role of QA is documenting whatever you are performing, and other main role is auditing. That's nothing but reviewing or assuring. So that gets you quality assurance. Now coming to what is my role. Being in a small scale industry and being a QA manager, I overlook a lot of quality assurance things in my own company. Of course, I work with a big team and the team has divided roles and responsibilities. But as my role is vast, I will explain you each and every step to give you a gist of what does this mean in a QA department. Supplier qualification is the first thing I do. Who is a supplier? Supplier is nothing but my vendor from whom I buy raw materials or services. Services like pest control or services like cleaning. So these services and raw materials that I procure are my suppliers, and I as a quality assurance person is supposed to qualify them. Every day I cannot go and buy raw materials from a different vendor. I need to have a certain quality. This is very well correlated with vegetable shopping. If I have to buy vegetables, I go to only picked up 2-3 stalls whom I know they are good vendors with respect to rate and quality. Same way for my raw materials, I will have a shortlisted list of vendors from whom I can purchase those raw materials. Now this system involves what is their background in sense of their history in the market with quality and rates, their lead time to deliver me. I should not be waiting for their supply. Also, how their facility is. So when I say I qualify the supplier, I will take their samples, I will be testing it, I will go to their facility, see how they are actually preparing, just like a vegetable vendor. You will go to the vegetable store to see how he has stored it. You will not just keep ordering without knowing how his setup is. So that is a brief introduction of one part of QA role, which is supplier qualification. There are companies which have many vendors and a big team only doing supplier qualification. So that is also a scope of you entering in the QA department. Next comes self-inspection. That is nothing but conducting internal audits. Audits are periodic surveillance or periodic inspection. What you do in self-inspection as a QA department is, if the interval is set for say 4 months, every 4 months you will go to different departments and inspect them. Inspect them with the sense of reviewing their documents, reviewing their facility, interviewing some of the workers and understanding whatever they are documented is right or wrong. It's just like your Viva. When then external comes for your Viva, they question you to figure out, have you performed well in your entire semester, or you've just copied from your colleagues and reported the results. So that is how self-inspection works in an industry. So you are, as an QA person, you will be internally auditing. Shop floor monitoring, it is ensuring GMP is followed at all stages. GMP is good manufacturing practices. Shop floor monitoring means you are monitoring the activities, production activities conducted on the floor. So on site, you will be moving around, seeing how people are doing their job. Are they actually performing the steps that are required? Are they actually doing all in-process testing? How are they taking samples? How are they moving around? How is the area maintained with sanitation? How have they used their personal protective equipments, etc. So this is ensured by a QA at the shop floor. Release batch is another role of a QA person. Any batch manufactured in a pharma industry will be released for sale to the customer only after QA person approves it. So a QA person will ensure that there is integrity of the batch and its records before any dispatch. When I say integrity of batch means the QA person will ensure that everything that was manufactured was appropriate, everything that was tested for the batch was appropriate, the results and records are combined, reviewed, and then the QA would release the batch for the sales department to dispatch it. Coming to the next, that is training. Training is another role of a QA department. There are certain companies who have dependent training department, but majority of the places, QA is the person involved in training. Example, if you have drafted a document or a system or rule, it is your job to train other departments. What does that document mean? How are they supposed to follow it and implement it? So training comes as a very important role of a QA person. Coming to the next, validation. Validation of various systems is also under a quality assurance person. Of course, this comes with a team of experts. Validation is nothing but you validate your methods of analysis, you validate processes, you validate cleanings, etc. These validation ensures that whatever system you have set is going to produce required results any point of time. For example, if you are validating an assay method, the validation ensures that this method, assay of say paracetamol, this method will always give you results of the percentage of paracetamol in that sample. It will not give you result of any other compound. That is validation, which is most important in any of our processes, right from synthesis to analysis to cleaning, etc. Coming to the last part of main QA role, it is quality system. Now this quality system, or popularly known as QMS, that is quality management system, is involved not just in manufacturing or pharma industry, but majorly used by almost all industries. ISO 9001 is a quality management system guidelines. You must have read ISO 9000 mark in many products around you, even in educational institutes. So basically, anybody following a quality management system is a QMS approved or a quality assured system. Now in this, you have a lot of documentation as well as investigation approach for out of specification, which is OOS, change control, which is CC, complaints, that is complaints from customers, deviations. I'll explain you all these terms briefly ahead. So this gives you a gist of what all roles can come under a QA department. And you being an applicant or candidate, depending on the company you're applying, there might be a specific role to your job description, or it can be a compilation of all, like how I follow my job role. Coming to the next part, what are the skills that you will require to be a part of QA department? So if you have these skills, you can be a good candidate for a QA department, or if you want to be a part of QA department, you should make sure you develop these skills to have a good progress in your future career. Starting with first, that is qualification. Coming to time management and team management. Coming to soft skills and communication skills, technical writing, leadership. Now, qualification is something, of course, we are all pharmacists, so that comes with a basic qualification to enter a pharmaceutical QA department because we have the background technical knowledge. Further qualification, if you require, there are a lot of certificate courses available. There are also a lot of guidelines which can help you understand what a QA department should run like. Time management and team management. As you would observe, all these job roles that I described, it's nothing work that you are doing. It's all you are reviewing the work of others. So it's very important that you are working with a team. You're not working alone. For example, if you are doing quality assurance or reviewing records of quality control department, it is the analyst who is working. You are the only one reviewing. So till the time he doesn't work, you won't review. So QA department is, of course, independent, but very dependent on other departments for the input of work. So team is very big and bilateral. So team management is a good skill required. Time management is another skill required because you as a QA department will release the batch. If you don't do things on time, it won't move ahead. There are a lot of steps in manufacturing also, like in-process quality control test, which are certified by QA. If the QA doesn't do it on time, the process manufacturing won't go ahead and everything will lag. So, which is not acceptable in any business organization. So your time management and team management skills are important. Coming to the next, soft skills and communication skills. As I had told you, you're also going to be auditing. You're also going to be reviewing and training. So this comes to all the technical people, right from operators to chemists, to supervisors, to managers, etc. So your communication skills with every level and every background of person is important to get the work done from them. For example, I am producing a new document today, training them, and I want them to start recording in this new format right from tomorrow, is some soft skill which also requires to convince them, because no change is easily accepted. So those soft skills and communication skills are also important for you to be an effective QA person. Coming to the next, that is technical writing. As I had described before, QA is involved in a lot of document production also. So QA department will write a lot of documents and guidelines and procedures. So it's something that you have to write in a very crisp and clear language, which is understood by all who has to use it. And this will be something that is technical. You're not writing a fictitious story. So it's a technical writing skill, which is involved in QA department. Coming to another part of the skills, that is leadership. Again, when you have to manage a team, you have to control your time. That's nothing but a leadership skill reflecting. So with all these skills in you, you can definitely be a good QA person. And QA department is such, the packages vary right from minimal to exaggerate amounts. Depending on your profile, depending on how you actually do your job work, there's a lot of incentives and progress and higher packages available. So all these skills in you, if you develop, you will be a good QA person. So with this, are you willing to join this department? If yes, there's only one mantra to QA. Do what you write and write what you do. If you follow this mantra, there is no regulatory body who can pick you up, who can pinpoint you, who can reject you. So this mantra is a golden mantra given, followed even by US FDA. And be clear on one very important thing. It is you who are releasing the batch as a QA person. So there's a lot of responsibility because your released medicines are going to the patient directly. There is no testing happening. Once you have released from your formulation company, it goes to the distributors, a long chain of retailers, and then finally to the patient as it is. It does not get reopened, it does not get tested. So your one signature of release of batch impacts a lot of public health. So you have a lot of responsibilities. If there is any recall or any mishap of your medicine and the market recalls it, there's a lot of loss to your company, and that company will come and catch you, will question you. So this mantra helps you follow the best ethics required for quality assurance. Do what you write and write what you do. Coming to the next, if you are interested, if you are willing for QA department, how do you enter a QA department? Being a student, your main thing is your qualification. But there are two ways of entering a QA department, either by qualification or by experience. There were not many QA courses initially. It started in the last decade. So if you are qualified in your M.Pharm with QA, or you have certified QA courses with your B.Pharm, or you are a PhD in QA, these will definitely let you in directly into QA department. Otherwise, there are a lot of people in the industry who have entered QA department through experience. When I say through experience, it's more like they've worked in QC department for a few years and they know how the entire department runs. They know everything up and down, and now they can assure it. Or there can be people who worked for a few years in QC, few years in production. Now they know how the entire company is running and they shift to QA. It's just like a school teacher starts with something like basic classes, basic chapters, then she'll move to important chapters or board exam related chapters, and then she will turn into a principal. That's how the hierarchy goes through experience. Similar is the case in a QA department. They will do a shop floor work, analyst work, and then step by step move into the hierarchy and move to quality assurance department. But being a student with a qualification, you do have scope of entering QA department directly. And as you move to the department, of course, there are changes or things to learn from campus to corporate, but that is part of your job profile. Now, what is expected as a fresher when you go for interview for a QA department? As a fresher, of course, they know you don't know a lot of real world work, but they still have certain things in mind which will help them pick you as a good candidate for the job profile. I have shortlisted 4 main things which will be elaborated further. First is knowledge. You need to have good understanding and interpretation of guidelines. Second is review skills, where your verification of different documents and practices is important. Third is communication skills and honesty, where you're communicating, as I mentioned, with operators to training customers, etc. Then lastly is technical writing, where your writing skills are important in simple and precise English. Now, as we move further, I'll be explaining you each of these. Now, when you prepare for your interview, keep all these 4 things in mind, which will help you answer their technical questions. Their technical questions can be varying, a direct question or something like a case study or a situation-based question, but your knowledge of these things will be important for you to answer. What knowledge is needed? When I say knowledge, GXP is most important. GXP can be, X can be replaced by things like C, D, L, M. GMP is good manufacturing practices. GLP is good clinical practices. CP is good clinical practices. GDP is good documentation practices. So this is how GXP works. It's very important for you to know what a GXP term is. Everything is generalized around GMP, right from your syllabus to maybe the interview, everything will be GMP focused. So when I say GMP, there is Schedule M guidelines from Drugs and Cosmetics Act. I'm sure you all know about it and you all have studied. There are ICH Q7 guidelines about GMP. There is WHO TRS guidelines about GMP. So in interview, you should know what GXP is, what GMP is, what are popular GMP guidelines. You should also know what are different ICH Q guidelines, Q1 to 12, and also various schedules. Coming to the next, you should have knowledge of what are types of documents in a QA department. SOP, standard operating procedure, which is a document which will provide you procedures for every operation, right from entry exit to a QC department, to washing hands in the QC department, to testing a sample, to sampling a sample, etc. All these are part of procedures, operating procedures, and these documents should be known by you. Most of you who have gone through an industrial training in your 1 month industrial training before your final year will know what an SOP is. So this can be a popular question in your interview. What is SMF? Is Site Master File, which is a master file describing everything of the site, manufacturing site, right from its area, its location, its building of construction, its number of rooms, number of departments, number of ACs, etc. Everything will be included in a site master file. What is a drug master file? That's DMF. Again, it's a master file containing all the details of the drug that you are using as a formulation company or producing as an API company. So details of drug would include its structure, its different names, its NMR structure, its IR spectrum, its uses, its process of manufacturing, its analysis, its various parameters, etc. All the details available with the company about that drug will be filed as a drug master file. What is APQR? Annual Product Quality Review. Again, this is a very, very big department in most of the companies. Companies producing like hundreds and 200s of products will have an independent department where they hire a lot of freshers to prepare APQR of every product. APQR will be, as the name suggests, annually done. It's a product quality review. So you review the quality of that product annually, in which you will document how many batches were produced, how were they produced, were they qualified, was there any reprocess rework done, was there any complaint, was there any changes in the process or the raw materials, etc. is all documented in the document called APQR. As I had mentioned earlier, QMS, Quality Management System, is a very important part. Now, answers to this: what is quality management system, what is CC, deviation, OS, self-inspection, QRM, etc. is very important for you to know before going to the technical round of QA department. Change control, that's CC, is nothing but you are documenting any changes made in the procedure. For example, if your standard operating procedure says you have to weigh 5 grams of this compound and dilute it in water. Now, today, if you have only 4 grams, or if you change, if you see pharmacopoeia and there are changes made that instead of 5 gram, you're supposed to dilute 10 grams now. So you will go under a change control system, change the entire SOP and make it from 5 to 10 grams, which is nothing but a change control system. You have changed what is documented. Deviation is similar, but it can be temporary deviation that only today, because I don't have 1 extra gram of the compound, I'm using 4 grams instead of 5, and which is what I file it as a deviation. Out of specification, which is OOS, is something that leads to investigation. I took an LOD of a sample. The LOD as per specification was supposed to be not more than 0.5%. But when I tested, I got the result as 0.7%. So my result came out of specification. Now this will be documented and shared with my department. Everybody will start investigating on the OOS, right from my department to QA department. But why was the result out of specification? There can be results like calculation error, reagent error, instrument failure, or things like product was wrong, product was not dried well up to the mark. So all these things, when are documented as out of specification, it goes under an investigation round and the root cause is analyzed. Self-inspection, already explained before. And next term is QRM, that is quality risk management. This is very important in your latest guidelines. So again, if there is an interviewer who wants to know how updated you are with your knowledge of QA, QRM is something which you should know. It's quality risk management. I would relate it to something like your two-wheeler driving. You know, two-wheeler is not the safest thing, but you still drive. You drive it with a risk, but you manage it by wearing a helmet, maintaining a speed, maintaining a distance. So even in medicines, there are certain stages. You don't stop everything that I cannot produce best quality. There are certain let goes on a risk management basis. So you have to be justifying. And that justification has to reflect in your history. That's a QRM approach to your quality assurance. Coming to validations, I have already explained what a validation term is. AMV is analytical method validation, CV is cleaning validation, PV is process validation. I am sure you've gone through all these things in your syllabus, but again, these terms and understanding of them is important for your interview. Vendor management, or as mentioned before, it's supplier qualification, is also another term, or maybe you will actually go for an interview only for this profile. So VQ is vendor questionnaire, where a questionnaire is produced to the vendor, which will have all their minute details. What is the area you are maintaining? How many steps is your process? How many people are involved? Number of tests? How many times do you clean, etc. Are such questions in the vendor questionnaire. Your vendor will fill and give you. You will just review and find out how good or keen is he in producing a quality product. Audits, again, you go to your vendor to audit his facility and ensure how is he performing the manufacturing of the product that he's supplying to you. Coming to the next, review skills. What is required in a review skill? You need to verify the documents that are prepared by concerned people. You need to verify the results that are produced by concerned people like analysts. You need to verify the data entered in various records. How do you do these verification? By observation, by interviewing that person, or by cross-verifying two different documents to correlate. So these are the methods that you review. In an interview, you might be asked, if you say as a role, I am going to review documents, approve documents, etc. They might ask you how. So when you have to answer how, it can be through observations, it can be through interview or questioning that person, or by cross-verifying two documents. A standard example, if there is a SOP for instrument, it is the chemist or analyst who is going to use the instrument will write the procedure. So that SOP will be prepared by QC chemist, but it will be verified or checked by a QA person, and it will also be approved by a QA person. So when you have to verify or check, you need to know what he's written is right or wrong. You'll do that by observing his procedure, you will do that by questioning him, or you will do that by cross-verifying his procedure with the manual of the instrument. So this is a classic example of what review skills, like where review skills will be required for you as a QA professional. Now, communication skills and honesty, why is it needed? You need communication skills to inspect your team. You need it to train your team. You need communication skills to communicate with up and down hierarchy, that is with your top management of what is happening around, with your lower management teams like your operators and all, of how to conduct. So a good communication skills are required. Honesty is most important, because you don't want the wrong batch to get released. So if you have observed something up and down, you have to be honest enough and rework on the product so quality product are out of the company, which avoids any quality hurdles. Technical writing, why is it needed? You have to draft documents of QA department. For example, site master file is drafted by QA department. So you need to have that technical writing skills. Your English should be crisp and clear so that everybody using those documents or reading it understands what is written. It need not be super fancy English language. It need not be something which is loose, but a good English language. You need to have good understanding of the systems. If you don't understand the quality management system, for example, what is change control or market complaint, or how are you going to investigate out of specification, you will not be able to reflect it in your document with a good English. So understanding is another important skill. Coming to the gist of the services that you would need, or I can provide you for the guidance, is 6 main steps. Build your CV for this interview. Groom appropriately. You should look a good professional who can stand in front of an external auditor or a drug inspector. You should not be looking like a college going student. No one in a QA department would prefer them. So that is another skill. Prepare for general round. As you had seen the session of PharmaCAD or E-Act last Sunday, that general round is again important, HR round. Then you switch to QA department round. If you have applied to specific company for a QA department, you should understand what are going to be the roles and responsibilities of that QA department in the scope of that site. For example, if it's a lab testing site, then you need to know QA department related to the lab testing site. If it's a manufacturing of API, then something related to API QA. If it's a CQA department standalone, then something related to that. Pranav, there is something on the screen. Next step is read about basics of QA, which was the gist of my presentation of what all QA involves, what are the terms, etc. And lastly, interpret some case studies, because there are going to be interviews where they will give you a situation. For example, I have a team of QC chemists who needs to know the new procedure. How are you going to go about? So you need to know that new procedure, say for example, of good documentation practice. Let me give you an example that your company has changed documentation practices from blue ballpoint pen to black ballpoint pen. Now what you as a QA will supposed to do is change the SOP through a change control system, make the changes in the SOP that now you are using a black ballpoint pen. Then after that SOP is approved, you will train the required people in the QC lab that initially our system was blue pen, now you have to use a black pen. So please start using a black pen. Once you train, you have to see the effectiveness of training, because after 2 days, somebody might forget and start using a blue pen again. So this is how you as a QA will play a role, and these can be some situations asked in your interview, for which you need to know all the roles, responsibilities, terms, etc. of a QA. So interpreting some case studies is again important for your QA round. I hope you all can prepare well with this presentation. Good luck if you're interested for your QA department. And I'm always available to answer your queries. Thank you for your time. I hope you had a good clarity on what QA department is.
Yeah, Forum, we have some questions. Thank you so much for your session.
Sure.
Forum?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a couple of questions. Just give me a moment. I'll just make a note
All
of
right.
this. Yeah, so the first question we have, you have already covered some part of it before. The
Okay.
first question is, as a QA manager, would you prefer a candidate with a research and development experience? And does the shift from core research and development to quality assurance have any edge?
As a QA manager, I would not be picky about picking up a student or a candidate from a specific research and development department. I would be more keen on seeing how that person interprets the systems and can control the changes. Second part of his answer, that can you repeat the question?
Yeah, the question is, if there, okay, this one, does the shift from research and development to QA have any edge?
Yes, it does, because when you are in research and development, you are doing a small part of vendor management, from process development, analytical method development, some validation, some scale up, some regulatory filing. So in an R&D department, there's a lot of small milestones of other departments. So maybe that candidate is more preferable. If you are coming from a QC lab, say, example, you will be having knowledge only of QC testing and documentation. You won't have a lot of knowledge of how it goes into vendor procurement or process synthesis, etc.
Okay, we have one more question for him.
Yes.
The question is QA certification mandatory even if QA is covered as a subject in the master's program? And if it is mandatory, what are the certifications recommended by you?
It is not mandatory, because in our syllabus we do have a gist. It's just icing on the cake to have certifications, because that gives an idea that you know something more than other fresher candidates. So that makes you stand out. There are courses on good manufacturing practices. There are certain courses on validations. There are some online certificates as well as physical certificate courses. So for example, if you do a certification course on validation, your interviewer will understand that amongst all the other candidates, you are somebody who knows little more of validation than others. If he's looking out for a candidate to help him with a validation project, he'll definitely prefer you, because for him, his protocol is set. He's a senior person. He's not going to be dependent on you coming and designing the validation program. He just needs your small inputs and you to execute whatever they have designed. So for a person like him, you are a better candidate, because he doesn't have to spend time and energy on you to make you understand what validation is. So that's where certification courses help you.
12:35.
Yeah, Forum, we are not able to hear you.
Okay. So certification courses are not mandatory. They are just icing on the cake, because it makes you stand out from other candidates, as it certifies that you know something more than others. That was first part of his answer. Second part, where he is asked that which kind of online courses or what are the courses available. I would say there are certain courses on GMP, on validation, which are available online as well as there are physical courses, weekend programs, etc. So if you do them, you understand that particular subject more. So if you have done a certificate course on validation and you apply for a job where they are looking for a validation team, you hold a better chance, as the interviewer will know I don't have to spend time on this candidate to teach him or to explain him what validation is. So that gives you a brighter chance to get involved. Was this audible?
Yes, Forum.
Okay.
Yeah, just one more question we have.
Sure.
We have a question here which says, is it preferred to do a PhD to get a good job in QA, or MPharm with a certificate course would do? It is similar to some points that you have already covered, but yeah.
Yes. So when you do PhD, your PhD topic is never going to be your job project. PhD just reflects that you are a person who can find solutions to some problems. Any PhD project, for example, if you're doing PhD in Sutix, you are developing a formulation, say a nanoparticle tablet. When you do a job, you are not going to do the same project. You will end up doing some different research project. So your PhD never connects you to the job profile. It just gives you a gist that how there is a problem and you solve that problem. So depending on the job profile, especially when QA does not require any hardcore research and development skills, maybe an MPharm with certain certifications is more preferred than a PhD.
Okay, we have two more questions for him.
Yes.
One question is, as you said that you can enter into QA through work experience also. So
Yes.
which fields is a work experience necessary in to get into QA?
Giving you a classic example of a manufacturing setup, there are a lot of BScs, MScs in the field. So if there is a BSc, MSc person working in QC department, say since a decade, he will be easily moving to a QA department because he's known the department, known QC department in and out since 10 years. So your qualification of pharmacy is not exclusive to get into QA. There are going to be your competitors who are a chemistry background, BSc, MSc background, but you hold a brighter chance against them because you know the pharma industry more than them. They need more experience compared to you. So your qualification does matter. Your experience, this is for every field, that more you are experienced in that department, more you can excel, because books don't teach you as much as practical knowledge will. And entering QA department of, as I had explained with an example of manufacturing unit, a QA department would mainly look over production and QC. So if you have a experience in both the department, you are better candidate. If you have experience of only one department, you will definitely know what is going on in other department. So it is more situation based. Your skills of change management or communication or leadership will also matter after a few years of experience.
Okay, thank you, Forum. We have one more question. I hope you don't mind.
No, sure.
Yeah, we have one question which says, can you give a gist of the courses that could be useful for jobs in QA? Like you are saying certain certifications, if you could just give an idea about which kind of certifications would that be?
Mainly it is GMP or QMS. So QMS is most important because once you are quality management system certified, you will be able to enter a API, a formulation industry where they are manufacturing, distributing, testing, etc. So first and foremost important is your QMS certification. Then comes your GXP certification. If you're a person interested to go into clinical trial setup, then there are GCP courses also. You also have courses on validation. That comes more if you are interested in your manufacturing or R&D setups. So these are three main categories I would suggest you should look into for certification courses.
Okay, thank you, Forum. And one more question we have. If it's from a
Sure,
student. He says, if we search for a research project nowadays, what would be a better project for, like a QBD or validation or formulation? What kind of research project would be good enough?
So I did not get this question clearly. If that student is doing MPharm, looking forward for a research project in what?
That's the question I'm just reading from the channel that we have got. If we search for a research project, which one is good for nowadays, like QBD, validation, formulation, etc.
So formulation is the most popular research projects. When you do a formulation research, you apply QBD to it. So QBD is nothing but quality by design, where you are designing the formulation right with the quality perspective, and you're not testing it in the last. So right from its first step of which raw material to be taken, from where to be taken, you are imparting quality to it. That is quality by design, which is applied in a formulation project. So if you are synthesizing an API, you apply QBD to it. If you are formulating a tablet, you apply QBD to it. If you are developing a method of analysis, you apply QBD to it. So QBD is not a standalone project. It is an application to other projects, and it's a latest trend. So you will, of course, stand out when you use QBD as an approach to have a quality product. Validation is once you have found something. For example, I formulated a new tablet. Once I formulate, I validate how I formulated. Once I develop the method, I validate how I develop the method. So again, validation is not something new. You have to first find out what is a new method or a new process and then validate it. So whoever's asked this question, I hope there is a clarity that what you are doing as a new research, QBD and validation are elements to it. They are not three independent projects. Hope this clarifies this question.
Yeah. Thank you, Forum. I hope that answers the question for the student as well. And one more question we have is, can a student pursuing MPharm in Sutics eventually enter into QA?
Yes, because QA is one department which needs all other departments. So anybody in other departments can finally reach QA. And even if you are doing MPharm in quality assurance, your project is never going to be documentation. Most of the universities don't allow that. Your project for MPharm has to be something research, something innovative. So as a MPharm and QA person also, their thesis project will be either formulation or method development or extraction, like how other projects are. It is just that they learn something more quality focused, or in their first year, that is coursework of MPharm, they've learned all the guidelines, which is why they are tagged MPharm in QA and not MPharm in Sutics. So a person, vice versa, who's done MPharm in Sutics can enter QA department. It is just that if he's competing with a MPharm in QA, that MPharm in QA will have more knowledge of guidelines. So the person who's applying with MPharm in Sutics will have to prepare more for the interview. There's no biasness from the interviewer side.
Okay, thank you so much, Forum. Thank you so much for this session. I am sure the students would have learned a lot about QA and the entire job profile and the career aspects in QA. Thank you so much once again for joining us at the EACT.
Thank you. And
guys,
my contact details are already provided in the slides. If anybody needs it, do share my details. I'll be happy to help.
Certainly, sure. Thank you so much, Forum, once again.
Thank you.
Yeah. Guys, we'll take a 2-minute timeout and we'll be starting with the next session on clinical research. Thank you so much, guys. Stay tuned. We'll be joining you soon. Yeah, hi guys. Thank you for joining us once again for the EACT program. The next session we have is Mr. Deepak Narayanswamy. He has had a great experience of over 13 years in this industry. He is currently the Senior Manager Clinical Development at Sun Pharma Advanced Research Company Limited. He has done his MBA in Pharmaceutical Management from NMIMS, and he has also been associated with Reliance Life Sciences previously. So right now his session is about clinical research as a job profile, growth, eligibility criteria, and the interview skills. I'm sure you guys will enjoy this session as well. Deepak, if you could please take over the session. Just give me a moment. I'll have to.
Yeah, thank you, Pranav, for that wonderful introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. And thanks to the Pharmacad team for giving this opportunity for presenting about clinical research to the young pharma students. So I'll quickly share my screen. Okay, are you able to view my screen?
Yes, Deepak, screen is visible. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So
Thanks.
I'll quickly start with the presentation. So I'll be covering few, this is the agenda that I would be covering. I'll give you all a brief introduction about what clinical research or clinical trial is. The reason being, I believe your syllabus covers to a great extent the concepts about clinical research, but it is nevertheless good to have a short revision of what clinical research and clinical trials are. And this will also help you when you all prepare for the interviews, because most of the questions that the interviewers ask are usually related to the basics of clinical research, because the clinical research as such is not a degree course, and slowly the field is developing and there are some online courses that are coming up, but because it's not a full-fledged degree course, so there is no standard curriculum that is available for clinical research. So that's the reason it's good if you all have a brief idea about the basics of clinical research. So I'll be covering about that. Some few slides on the clinical trial process flow, so you understand who are the key players in clinical research, what each one does, and what their functions and responsibilities are. And towards the end, I would also cover the aspects related to what are the skill sets expected if one is aspiring to get into clinical research, and what are the growth prospects, and how do you start preparing for getting into this profile of clinical research. So I'll start with this brief introduction on clinical trial. So this has been taken from good clinical practice. The good clinical practice document also happens to be the Bible for clinical research. So anything and everything that is done in clinical research compliance with the guidelines. Though the guideline doesn't speak out as to how it has to be done at the ground level, but it sets expectations so that whenever these expectations are fulfilled at the end of the trial, expect a quality product or a quality result, which can be considered for the approval of the drug. So the definition, if we see, I mean, it's okay if you don't read the entire definition. That's why I've highlighted few key points. It says clinical trial is any investigation done in human subjects. So you have to keep in mind that it's an investigation. It's not a tried and tested procedure that is being done. So it's the drug is being investigated as part of a clinical trial, and you're trying to discover or verify something. So you're trying to understand something that you already don't know about. And these could be the clinical, pharmacological, and the pharmacodynamic effects of the investigational product. So the drug that you are testing as part of the clinical trial is referred to as an investigational product, because you're doing an investigation to find something more about that drug. And you also try to understand various aspects, which includes the safety profile of the drug and how the drug is metabolized. And the overall objective of during the clinical trial, as an end result of the trial, or as an overall objective of the trial, is to ascertain its safety and efficacy. Because ultimately, at the end of the trial, if the drug is approved, it's going to be provided to patients. It's going to be used for treatment. So before a drug is approved, it's important that its safety and efficacy is ascertained, and that's the reason we do the clinical trial. There are multiple terms: clinical trials, clinical study. So these are all synonymous terms. So this is in short what a clinical trial is. If you look at the schematic that is there at the bottom of the slide, this basically gives you the entire drug development pathway. So you start at the lab end. The first part is the part that happens at the lab end. You identify a target, a number of targets, then you do a hit generation, and then you optimize and shortlist few key leads, and then you work upon those leads. And once you have optimized that, then you get into the preclinical phase of testing, wherein there are, depending on the class of drug they are developing, depending on the disease or the therapeutic area for which you are developing the drug, the indication, there are specified guidelines which tell what kind of studies need to be conducted on what kind of animals, for how long, and what kind of parameters need to be tested. So a whole battery of tests and trials are done in the animal studies. And once the drug is found to be safe and it shows some promising results at the animal level in terms of its efficacy, that is when the molecule of this, the investigational product is brought into the clinical trial phase. And here again, there are, I mean, it's not a single trial that is done. There are multiple stages, and I presume you must have read about it somewhere. So just for your revision and for your understanding, if it's a new drug, it's always started the phase 1 study, wherein it's tested first time in humans. And because it's being tested first time in humans, it's tested on a very small number. And the primary objective here is to ensure that the drug is safe, and you also get a preliminary idea of up to what dose levels it is safe. And once you have this initial results from this phase 2 study, that's when you get into the phase 1 study. That's when you get into the phase 2 study. The phase 2 study again primarily ascertains the safety of the drug and to some extent the efficacy of the drug, and it also helps to establish what would be the right dose for the drug if it has to show the optimum efficacy levels in patients. And because there are multiple parameters and more multiple objectives defined, the sample size is slightly larger as compared to a phase 1 study. And this is particularly done in patients, whereas the phase 1 study, which I talked about, is done in healthy volunteers, except in case of drugs which are for oncology drugs, where it's not ethical to expose healthy volunteers to oncology drugs. So in those exceptional cases, you do the phase 1 in patients. Otherwise, the phase 1 is in healthy, and phase 2 onwards, you start testing the drug on patients. Once you have a preliminary idea on the efficacy of the drug, the safety of the drug is confirmed, you have established a reasonable dose for the drug, that's when you get into the pivotal phase 3 study. The results of this pivotal phase 3 study form the basis for subsequent application to regulatory authorities for getting the marketing approval for the drug. So in the phase 3 study, the efficacy objective is the primary, the primary intention of doing the phase 3 study, where you establish the efficacy to prove that the drug is effective. You compare it with other established drugs to say that it's either equivalent to them or superior to them in terms of efficacy. And the assessment and establishment of safety nevertheless continues to be assessed. And that is something that is done throughout the lifespan of the drug. Once you have satisfactory results from the phase 3 study, that's when you approach the regulators. So if it's US, if you are applying for a marketing approval in US, you go to the US FDA, you submit the data to them, get it reviewed by them. And if they find the data satisfactory, they also conduct a series of audits to confirm that whatever data you have done or whatever procedures you have followed are in line with whatever regulations and guidelines that have been put in place. And if it is found to be satisfactory overall, that's when the drug gets an approval. So this, in short, is the overall pathway for the development of the drug. Coming to some more detail in the clinical trial. So a clinical trial that we do, regardless of which phase of the clinical trial it is, which drug it is, which disease it is, there are some key pillars for any clinical trial or key aspects that need to be kept in mind. So for every clinical trial, they are bound by regulations. So, whichever model or whichever design we opt to conduct the clinical trial, regardless of that, we have to comply with the law of the land. So for clinical trial, every region, every country has its own laws that have been put in place. So the pharma company or the sponsor who is conducting the clinical trial has to ensure that every aspect of the clinical trial, right from the planning phase to execution phase, the recording of data, the reporting of the results, the ethical aspects, everything is in compliance with the regulations that have been laid down. So if you have to do a clinical trial in India, you have the clinical trial rules that had recently come up, and you have the Drugs Controller General of India who gives you a go-ahead for the approval for the conduct of a clinical trial before you start the clinical trial, and at the end of the trial when you submit the data, that again goes to the Drugs Controller for approval. Similarly, if you have to do a trial in US, then you have the US FDA, which is the body, and the rules for clinical trials are the Code of Federal Regulations. Similarly, if you are doing it in UK, it's the MHRA or the EMA guidelines. If you are doing it in Australia, it's the therapeutic TGA guidelines that you have to comply with. So every country has its own law of land. So every aspect of clinical trial, from the concept to execution to reporting, everything has to remain in compliance with this. Good clinical practice, as I mentioned in the start of the presentation. So these are international ethical and quality standards. So these define, it's like a guidance document which tells you what you have to consider in mind when you are performing any activity related to a clinical trial. If you are deciding on what kind of a trial I have to do, or what the design of the trial has to be, or what all aspects I have to take care when I am, say, providing the drug, what all aspects I have to take care when I am reviewing the data, what do I have to be careful about when I am recording or compiling the data, or in terms of reporting the data, and what do I have to do if something goes wrong. So for all these aspects, it provides a guidance for every role and for every activity. So this is again something which there's no clinical trial which can ignore this. Then comes the protocol. So the protocol is a trial specific. The regulations and the good clinical practices are not trial specific. I mean, they are more at an umbrella documents which are applicable for all trials. The protocol is more of a clinical trial specific document. It is specific to that particular clinical trial. It defines why you want to do that clinical trial, why you have, I mean, this defines what is the design that you have selected for doing a clinical trial. Will it be a blinded trial? Will it be an open label trial? How many times are you going to dose the patients to check the safety of the drug, to check the efficacy of the drug? For how long are you going to do that? What are the different kinds of data points that you're going to collect? How are you going to assess the data that you're going to collect, and how are you going to report the data? What are the known side effects from the drug, from the earlier studies, from the animal studies, or from the lab data that's already available? What are the risks associated with that drug? So all those elements are defined in that. And lastly, the SOPs. So these are again organization specific. So if every organization that conducts clinical trial, because this is a very highly regulated division and very highly regulated activity, so there is a great requirement for having specific SOPs for every activity that is done, so that at the end of the day, you are overall compliant to the regulations, to the good clinical practice, and to the protocol. So the SOPs, help you to achieve this. So these are again, they provide ground level instructions for performing any activity, so to ensure compliance. Before we go into more details, so for any clinical trial, there are some common terminologies, some key players that you would come across. So these are again, it's important that you are familiar with this. I mean, it's not necessary for you to know these things in too much detail,
Abhijeet,
but at least
sorry to
you should have
interrupt.
a basic.
Sorry, Deepak, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. Yes.
We are not able to hear you. Your voice is breaking a little. If you could just check the network connection, please.
Is it better now?
Uh, could you just try once more?
How about now?
No, still not. You're not able to hear you.
Okay, I'll just try and connect once again. Is this better?
Yeah, I hope it continues. Yeah, this is
Okay.
much better. Fair
Okay.
enough. We have one just a small concern. If you could just elaborate, I'll just put this question towards the end. Not a problem. We can continue for now, and I'll just add those questions towards the end of the session.
Sure. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So there are some key players, in any clinical trial. So it's important that whenever you're applying for any job, whenever you're attending an interview, it's important that you're familiar with these key terms. So one is the sponsor, and it's okay if you don't read the entire definition. It's more for your information, but it's just the terms that you have to be more familiar with. So for every clinical trial, you'll have a sponsor. These are usually the pharma companies that are developing the drug, but it can also be standalone, venture capitalists or finance firms that are sponsoring the clinical trial. Then you have the contract research organizations. So, though the pharma companies are developing the drug, all pharma companies do not have a clinical trial division. And even if they have, it might not have the entire resource or all the roles that are needed for efficiently conducting a trial. So, and also, there are times when you're doing a global clinical trial where you might have to do the trials in multiple countries, depending on where you are likely to get the desired patient population, or if you have to do a particular clinical trial in a specific population. So in those cases also, you would need a contract research organization who have a presence in that region and who have the required resources and knowledge to conduct the clinical trial on your behalf. Investigator, so investigator as the doctors at the hospital sites who conduct the clinical trial, who administer the drug that you have developed to the patients, who collect all the data that you need from the patients, all the safety related data, efficacy related data. So they compile all that data. So these are the doctors who are referred to as investigators. Then you have the trial subjects. So these are the patients who have consented or agreed to be part of the clinical trial and who agreed to comply with the requirements of the clinical trial, be taking the drug regimen that's been defined for the trial and the number of times or the lab assessments which have to be done as part of the clinical trial for collecting data. Then you also have something called as the ethics committee. So every hospital has this committee. So they look into the documents of the clinical trial when the trial is being proposed to the hospital site, to be sure that it doesn't have any ethical concerns or it in no way compromises the safety or the well-being of the patients who are going to participate in these trials. So it's important that you familiarize yourself with these trials, and I've provided the reference from where these terms have been taken, and there are also many more such terms which are provided in the glossary section of the GCP document. So whenever you're preparing for an interview, you can glance through those so that you're familiar with these terms. So this next slide, this is again to show which are the different key players in the clinical trial and how they are interrelated and what is the communication channel. So as I mentioned, we have the regulatory bodies for every country, and they decide on the approval whether to allow a clinical trial to be done or not. So the sponsor company which is developing the drug, they prepare the proposal for conducting the clinical trial, they submit it to the regulatory bodies and seek their approval for conducting the trial. Once the approval is in place, then the sponsor's in-house team, they work with the contract research organization to which the trial has been outsourced for conduct. And that's when the execution phase begins. The contract research organization in turn works with these investigators of the hospital sites for ensuring the proper execution of the clinical trial that has been designed by the sponsor. And the investigators in turn work with the patients, the interested clinical patients who want to be part of the clinical trial, and they then administer the drug and collect the required data that's defined as per the protocol document. And as I mentioned, every hospital has its own ethics committees. The ethics committees work with the investigators and, if needed, with the patients to ensure there is no compromise on the safety and well-being of the patients. And depending on the requirement, the ethics committees also interact with the regulatory bodies if the need arises. And for ensuring the successful conduct of the trial, there are a long list of vendors, each offering a different kind of service. You may have a lab vendor, you may have a courier logistic vendor, you may have vendors supplying particular instruments that are needed for assessment. So depending on the clinical trial, the vendor requirement varies, but certainly this is an important piece for any clinical trial. And every party has its own functions, has its own set of teams, but the overall objective always remains the same. You have to ensure that the patient safety is maintained. There is no compromise on patient safety. And whatever you're doing, every activity that you're doing is in compliance with the protocol and the regulations and the GCP that are, the guiding documents for clinical research. This is the next slide. This is a clinical trial process flow document. This is just for your understanding as to how a clinical trial is conducted. So once you have a go-ahead from the regulatory body, be it the drugs controller or the US FDA, that you can initiate a clinical trial, that's when, the startup activities are in place. So you have a protocol document that's prepared. You decide what the budget for the trial is going to be, how much would be the expense for conducting the entire trial, how long would it take to conduct the trial, what resources, what vendors you would need. So all this goes into the startup phase. Then you decide the site selection. So you identify which are the potential hospital sites, who are the experienced doctors who are capable of conducting these trials. So you identify specific protocol requirement with them and see if they have the required patient population, if they have the required knowledge, experience, and training for conducting the for particular clinical trial. Once you have shortlisted those sites, then you submit all the trial related documents, the documents related to the investigator. All that documents gets compiled into a dossier, and that goes to the regulatory body, the licensing authority, and also to the hospital's ethics committee for their review. And once the review and once their queries are answered, that's when you get a green light for initiating the clinical trial. You also do some startup activities, because for every hospital that you're working with, you also have to get into a contract with them, agree on the terms and conditions, agree on what all document or plans will need to be prepared for tracking the activities, what are the documents that you will be preparing for collecting the data that gets generated in the clinical trial, how are you going to manage the supply of the drug that would be needed for shipping to all these hospital sites that are going to do, how are you going to collect the safety related information, how is the communication channel going to be. So all those aspects are then decided as part of parallelly as part of the site startup activities. Once you have the complete readiness, that's when you give a go ahead to the hospital sites and the doctors for initiating the clinical trial at the hospital. And whenever the doctor identifies a potential patient, they check and see the patient's profile, the disease condition, the diagnosis of the disease, whatever historical documents are available to see if the patient fits into any of the criteria that's required as per the protocol. Then the patient is provided information about the trial, and is asked to see if they would be willing to participate in the trial and how they could be participating in this clinical trial. And that's when it's part of the eligibility check. And that's when every hospital site that's participating in the clinical trial starts identifying and enrolling patients. So as and when they get enrolled, they are then administered the drug. Then their data is collected. So data starts flowing in for each of the patients and from each of these sites. But while the data is being collected, it's also important that someone goes and checks if the doctor and their team are collecting the data correctly, if they are performing the required lab tests, if they are being in compliance with the study protocol, if they are in compliance with the law of the land, and if they are not skipping or missing or anything, or if they are not hiding anything related to the drug. So that's why you have a monitoring of the entire activity. And you have a particular role of the research associate who goes and does this. And parallelly, any adverse reaction that you see as part of the clinical trial during the ongoing phase, you collect that data. There are also specified requirements for collecting and reporting this particular information. So that also forms a part of this ongoing phase. And as and when you collect more and more data, it's also important that you also clean that data. So there could be missing fields, there could be incorrect entries, there could be some clarifications that might be needed, there could be some mismatches which might have to be reconciled. So all that is something that becomes a part of the data cleaning activity. Once the data cleaning is done, then you have the clean data. That's when you analyze the data. And as part of analysis, what you do is you check and see if whatever hypothesis that you had defined right at the beginning of the drug, to say that it's equivalent to this particular drug, it has an efficacy which is at par with a commercially approved drug, or if you are establishing the safety, then you confirm whether the drug is safe at a particular dose or not. So the data that you're analyzing, you reconfirm it against the hypothesis that you had defined right in the beginning of the study, and then you do a set of statistical tests to confirm those results, and then the results then tell you whether you were able to achieve the objective that you had defined at the start of the trial. And then you finally prepare a clinical study report which summarizes the entire journey of what you did, how you collected, what were the challenges, what went right, what went wrong, and what are the final results and interpretation. And if the overall result is satisfactory and promising, that's when you go to the next step, and you again go back to the regulator and you tell them that the trial that you had approved earlier, you had given a go ahead earlier, we have completed that as per the regulations, and here is the data that we have, so please review and approve. So or review and provide your opinion. Then the regulators reviews and provides their opinion, conducts audits, reconfirms. That's the overall journey. And every step of this clinical trial journey, every department, every role and activity have to be in compliance with the good clinical practice, the regulations, the protocol, and the standard operating procedures. And then the project manager who's running the show, who's running the trial, has, is part of the trial right from start to end, and has to ensure that all these compliances are met. Moving on to the next role. So having looked at, the different players that are there, having looked at which are the steps that are involved in the clinical trial process flow, let's now look at the different functions that exist within the clinical research division. It's a big division, and there are teams that are so going into too much detail for every function may not be possible in this short presentation, but I've tried to give you a brief overview. So you have a business development team, so which decides which kind of drug the company should develop, which has a good market potential or which has unmet needs. So if there are patients who don't currently have available options for treatment, so is there any treatment that can be developed for addressing? So for example, right now, if COVID has, there are no drugs which are there for curing or preventing COVID, then that's unmet need. So the business development would see how many patients exist for this particular disease, and how can we address this unmet need. And in the same slide, if you see, I put in columns for the top three kind of requirement, or which are the key requirements or skills that are needed for each of these functions. So for each of these functions, so you can just quickly have a look at the green bullets to see what is the specific requirements for each of these functions. Next to the business development, you have the clinical or medical. So this is again a department which primarily has the team members have a medical degree. They have an understanding of the disease, and this is also the team that particularly defines the concept behind developing the drug, the key design behind developing the drug. They have discussions with multiple medical experts in those fields to understand their inputs on how the drug has to be developed. They liaise also with the regulatory teams, with the medical experts within the regulatory authority, to understand how the drug has to be developed, and they also provide the main key input for developing the drug. So for this particular team, it's very important that they have good technical knowledge, they have good people skills, they also have good communication skills, because whatever inputs they provide, or whatever basis they set up, that's going to be the key driver for the execution of the clinical trial. Then you have the medical writing team, which basically designs or drafts the documents that are needed for the clinical trial. Here again, it's important that they have good technical skills, and because that every document that they define or draft has to be in compliance with the regulatory requirement. Here again, you would see that for some divisions I have put in one bullet or two bullet. That doesn't mean that the team members or people from this department are poor in people skills, or they don't have communication skills. It's just that compared to the technical skills, the requirement for people skills, and compared to the technical skills, the requirement for communication skills are slightly lower. But that does not refrain any individual or any team member from these departments not to be good on those. There are team members who might not exceptional in terms of skills and exceptional in terms of technical and communication skills. You have the regulatory department, which liaises with the regulatory agencies and internally also liaises with all the team members to ensure that whatever documents are needed as part of regulatory requirement, as part of the law of that particular country, they are met with. So they ensure compliance to all the documents that need to be submitted, all the approvals that are needed before you conduct any trial, and similarly at the end of the trial, whatever data needs to go to the regulatory agencies, they also ensure that that is done as per the required law of the land. Then you have the clinical operations and project management. So for a particular given clinical trial, the major volume of resources, the major spend, and also the major volume of the overall time is a part of this particular department is called clinical operations and project management. For a particular clinical trial, I would say almost close to around 40 to 45% of the resources come from this one particular clinical operations department. For this particular department, it's again important that the department liaises with multiple stakeholders. They also, this department is the one which also goes to the hospital sites to interact with the doctors. They interact with different vendors. So it's important that they have the required technical skills, people skills. So these are in brief the specific requirements for each of those functions. Then you also have the data management, which looks into the data management part of it, how the database that is going to collect the data for the clinical trial is going to be designed. What are the different data fields that you are going to design? So at the end of the trial, when you're analyzing the data, it is important that you have the right kind of data. So for example, if you're developing a drug for diabetes, it's important that all the data fields that you collect as part of the clinical trial helps you to interpret or assess the effectiveness of and the safety of the drug against diabetes. Though you would also be collecting information for cardiac related parameters, though you would also be doing a general physical examination of the patients, you would also be checking their height and weight. But ultimately, what is more important is to see that the parameters which help you in interpreting the effectiveness and safety of the drug is getting captured. So the data management team helps to identify and design these fields based on the protocol specific requirements. Then you have the biostatistics and SAS programming. These are again a department which are again more specialized. The team has a background in biostatistics and SAS programming. They decide on how many, they provide inputs on the sample size as to how many patients are needed for conducting the clinical trial, what are the passing criteria, whether a Z test is needed or a T test is needed. So they decide on what are the right statistical models to be implemented for assessing the data that gets generated. And finally, the data that finally you get at the end of the clinical trial, they also represent the data in terms of the required format, in terms of the tables and the graphs which summarize the overall results. Then we also have the safety and pharmacovigilance team. I understand you have already covered. So Abhijeet gave a very good presentation on this particular topic, and you already got a good oversight about this. And the GCPQA. So the GCPQA is again specialized because the quality team has to have a very thorough understanding of the quality aspects of the clinical trial, and they are basically experts in terms of the regulations, the good clinical practice and SOPs. And throughout the conduct of the trial, right from the concept stage, when the documents are being drafted till the time the final data gets generated, they perform the activities as per their SOPs to ensure that the trial has the required compliance to all these required guidelines and regulations. So this is the next slide. So here what I have tried to do is to try and explain you for each of these roles that we looked at in the earlier slide. I have, put in place some key skill sets that are needed, both in terms of the technical skills, the communication skills, people skills, commercial or finance or accounting skills, and also whether these teams are internal or external facing. So by internal or external, I would mean for a team which is more internal, they would have to deal with more people within the organization. For the ones which are external, they would need to deal with more people outside the organization, and the ones which are both, they would need to interact to a great extent with stakeholders across both internal and external. So for a business environment, because they have to get into more of the business aspects, they need to have very good communication skills, people skills. They would also need to, sign deals with multiple partners. They might have to get into contracts with other pharma companies or with contract research organizations. So they need to have good people and good negotiation skills. Because they are not going to get into the implementation of the trial, or they are not going to be expected to be more compliant to the regulations, because they're not doing more of a technical.
Deepak, hi, Deepak, you there? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, got it again, I think. Now
yeah.
I've
Okay.
unmuted you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much.
No
Okay,
problem.
I'm not sure which was the last. Okay, I hope you all were able to follow when I was on this particular slide. Okay, so on
I'll
this
just
particular,
check. Yeah.
yeah, sure. Are you able to
Yeah,
view?
go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay,
I'm able to view it and we are able to hear you as well. Perfect. Not a
okay,
problem.
yeah, thank you. Okay, so for each of these functions, I've listed in terms of high, medium, low, and across the various parameters. There's more of a self-explanatory side, and the reason why I have particularly put this slide is whenever you are preparing for any interview, or whenever you are appearing for an interview, the person who's interviewing you, say for example, if you appear for an interview for the clinical operations team. So I'm part of the clinical operations team and the project management team at Sun Pharma. So say for example, if I interview a candidate who is appearing for a particular role within clinical operations and project management, as part of the interview, I would try and assess the candidate for communication skills, people skills, to see if they have how good they are with numbers, and to see if they have what is their basic knowledge in terms of GCP. I wouldn't expect them to be too highly, knowledgeable in terms of technical. When I say technical, in terms of the disease area or the therapeutic area, but they should at least have a basic knowledge. Similarly, and the reason being because this requirement, or the role demands that the candidates have these requirements. Similarly, if you go into a regulatory role, or if you go into say for example a biostatistics role, where there you may be required to have a more high level of technical knowledge. For the other domains, it's okay if you have a reasonable or a fair amount of skill set to get selected for that particular role. So when you're preparing for it, it's you can try and see map yourself against the expectations of the role, and that will help you to better prepare, and if there are any gaps, it will also help you to prepare and fix those gaps, so that overall you are able to perform better in the interview. And similarly, depending on your personal comfort level, see for example, if you are a person who is more of a people person, who is more an extrovert person, who finds it difficult to sit at one place and look at the screen for long, but would rather prefer to be more interactive with more people, then you can see for roles which are more external facing, or the roles which fall under both, then those roles may be more suitable for you. But if you are someone who is more comfortable doing activities alone, who can perform much better when you do an activity alone rather than doing it in a big team, or rather than talking too much, or if you're a person who is like talk less, do more individually and independently, then there are the roles which are more of high GCP and highly technical, which require less of communication and less of other people skills and commercial skills. Then those are the roles that you can opt for when you are applying for any particular role within clinical research. Then moving on to the next slide. So here what I've done is, so every vertical in this previous slide, every function has its own particular job description. They are standalone departments within the clinical research, overall clinical research department. And they have their own job description, own expectation, a different hierarchy. But for today's discussion, and because clinical operation also happens to be the major, the major hiring happens within clinical research, clinical operations in any organization. That's why I've selected one particular department, the clinical ops, for sharing some job description related details with you. So at the entry level, any candidate who is a fresher or is at the junior level, we start with the role of clinical trial assistant. This particular role is primarily responsible for tracking all the trial related activities. So in any given trial, there are more than 1,000 activities that happen. You would have trial related to how many patients have been enrolled, how many hospital sites are there, how many approvals are there, how many invoices have been processed, how much drug you have, how much drug you want. So there are n number of activities that happen in any clinical trial. So the clinical trial assistant efficiently coordinates with different team members and tracks these activities, so that the team which is managing the trial has an overall update on the current status of all the activities. They are also responsible for compiling various documents that are required for submission to the regulatories, to the hospital sites, for when we are seeking approval. And they also provide support to the different roles in enabling them to perform their activities better. In terms of reporting, they have a line manager whom they report to for our bigger organizations, and they also report to the project manager who is specific for that particular project. Next in the hierarchy is the role of the clinical research associate. So this particular role this particular clinical research associate role, this involves a lot of traveling, because the CRA, as they are commonly called, they are responsible for visiting the hospital sites and for monitoring all the data that is getting collected and recorded, to ensure that the hospital and the doctor and their team are performing the clinical trial exactly as per the protocol specified requirements, and there is compliance. They also try and see where are the gaps, wherever there have been deviations, they ensure they are documented. Wherever any input from quality is needed, they ensure that those are done. And if the hospital side needs any support in terms of efficiently conducting the clinical trial, they also provide the required support. So they are also responsible for managing the trial, and they are basically the face of the organization at the hospital. So the doctor doesn't on a day-to-day basis interact with everyone in the sponsor or the CRO. For the investigator, it is this CRA who is their main point of contact when it comes to clinical trial. The CRA may not have answers to all questions the doctor has, but being the main point of contact, he then internally coordinates with every other functions to ensure that the investigator and his or her team has all the required support for efficiently conducting the clinical trial. They also keep a track on the track of the enrollment. By enrollment, I mean the number of patients that get accrued into the clinical trial, whether they are the right kind of patients. So say for example, if you're developing a drug for anti-diabetic drug, and if the patient population is are the diabetes patients, but if your protocol says those patients need to have their blood sugar within a particular range. Now, when a doctor or investigator has enrolled or recruited a patient in a clinical trial, the monitor or the CRA has to go in as part of the monitoring, see whether the diabetes patient had the required blood sugar levels within that particular range that is specified as per the protocol. The patient may be a diabetic, but it's further needed that the patient falls within that specified criteria to be eligible for getting into the trial. So the monitor has this role of ensuring compliance. As far as reporting is concerned, the CRA also has a line manager reporting for the resource related activities and reports to the project manager of that particular clinical trial. Then you have the senior clinical research associate. So as the CRA becomes more experienced, they are assigned with more complex clinical trials, at times multiple clinical trials or multiple protocols at the same time. They are, some trials which are difficult to understand and implement, or the investigators who are even, more difficult to deal with, they are, assigned trials of those more complex nature. Besides that, the seniors clinical research associate also has the responsibility of grooming their juniors so that they get a chance to grow and come up the ladder. A lot of trial document level preparation activities are also assigned to the senior clinical research associate, so that they also get to learn and they become ready to take on more higher responsibilities. And like the CRA, they also report to the line manager and the project manager. Next comes the project manager. So the project manager is one person who is responsible for ensuring that the trial is conducted as per the expectations that were set in. So the project manager should have an end-to-end idea of what needs to be done to ensure the trial is conducted. In simple words, he's the one person responsible on a day-to-day basis for ensuring smooth execution of the clinical trial. And any aspect of the clinical trial, the aspect may or may not be related to his function. For his particular function, which usually the project managers are part of the clinical operations team, but some organizations which are bigger organizations which have more defined verticals, the project management at times is also a separate function. So they work with all the functions within the department, be it the medical writing, be it the clinical, business development, statistics, every department within the clinical research, within the clinical research, the clinical development domain, and they ensure the trial is conducted. And they are also responsible for ensuring the milestones. So say if you have defined that this entire trial is going to take 4 years, and that 4 years is defined into, say, different percentages, milestones of one year each. Say at the end of the 1 year, this is where we will be. These are the number of patients that we would have tested. This is the exact volume of data that would have come in. This is the cost that would have incurred by the end of first year. This is the overall time that we would have spent. And so the project manager is responsible for ensuring that those milestones are met. And at the same time, also for ensuring that time, cost, and quality, which are the constraints that are part of any project or are part of any clinical trial, are managed. So if one particular hospital site is charging too much, then he has to ensure that the overall trial cost doesn't go cross the budget that has been assigned. He has to see how the cost can be accommodated. He also has to address issues. He or she also has to address various challenges, conflicts within the team, negotiate on timelines, negotiate on costs, a lot of activities for ensuring overall smooth conduct of the trial. The project manager primarily reports to the head of clinical research or the head of operations, depending on the design or the model of that particular organization. Then you have the head of operations who's responsible for all the operational activities or the conduct activities of all the clinical trials that are happening within that particular organization. They are also responsible for line management and resource management. They decide how many CRAs and CTAs need to be hired in a particular financial year, how many additional project managers are required, what are the upcoming projects, and how much resource or how much budget do we need for executing those trials. All those aspects are taken care by the head of operations, and the head of operations reports to the head of clinical research. So this is basically a generic ladder, and depending on the organizations, there may be variations to this, but this is like more or less in majority of the organizations, the terminologies may be different, or the specifics may be different, but by and large, this is the job description. Coming to this next slide, this is again, some part of it is covered in the earlier slide, but I just added some details to it. So this pyramid basically refers the different roles that we previously saw in the earlier slide. You start with as a clinical trial assistant, then you move up the ladder into CRA and the senior CRA, then you become a project manager, and then you ultimately aim to become the head of operations. And on the left, you would see in terms of the timelines, these are again average timelines. This is not a fixed or a predefined thing. And depending on the organization, depending on the individuals, efficiency, or how well they perform, how well they are able to achieve their targets, these timelines could vary significantly. But by and large, these are the timelines. So a clinical trial assistant on an average spends around somewhere, I say 0 to 3 years, because majority of the freshers start their career in clinical research with this role. They spend around approximately 3 years time in this, and then before they go on to the next role, which is the CRA role, where they spend somewhere around 3 to 4 years doing the on-site monitoring visits. And once they have gained the required experience of being a CRA and the senior CRA, that's when they are considered for entry into the project management role. The role title being project managers, and depending on the organizations, they might have assistant project manager, deputy project manager, and also at the senior level, you may have a project manager, a senior project manager, a lead project manager. So there are different terminologies, but this is by and large the general term that's used in the industry. And once project manager has spent sufficient years, gained experience of different trials, different indications, different geographies, different regulations, and has faced all possible kinds of challenges that come along with any clinical trial, then he or she is considered for growth. And the reason I chose this pyramid, because the head count of these different roles also follows this pyramid. You usually in any organization, you usually have only one head of operations. The project manager, number of project managers are again proportional to the number of projects that the organization is running, and the product pipeline. But then again, these are not very big in numbers. And as we move the pyramid, the numbers proportionately increase and decrease. And every role, depending on the complexity of the trial, they may be part of one particular clinical trial if it's a very large clinical trial, or they may at the same time manage multiple clinical trials if they are medium or small size clinical trials. So this has been this pyramid has been the generic ladder ever since, but of late, in the recent years, there have been many offshoots depending on the many contract research organizations have also come up with different roles, more specialized roles. And there have been multiple reasons for this. One is because in the last decade, there has been a big boom in the number of clinical trials that are happening in the country. So earlier, if the clinical trial assistant was doing, say, 30 unique activities and being part of 2-3 clinical trials at the same time, but if the number of trials are going up, it may practically not be possible to have one clinical trial assistant manage those many activities. So that also demanded that more specialized roles are generated. So large organizations or contract research organizations which deal with more than more number of clinical trials, 30 or 40 clinical trials, they then came up with more specialized roles. And the other challenge was, like, if you look at this pyramid, as I also mentioned, when a particular individual transitions from a clinical trial assistant to a clinical research associate. So the clinical trial assistant is an in-house profile, and when they move to the clinical research associate, they have to travel to these hospital sites, and that role requires traveling for approximately around, on an average, around 15 to 20 days in a month. So not everyone might be comfortable with traveling, and though they might be interested in the profile, but not everyone might be willing to spend traveling on so many days, or might not be comfortable visiting hospital sites and dealing with doctors and hospital documents and hospital administration and all such things. So then it's important that for them also to grow, for their career also not to become stagnant, there are these specialized functions that came up. So, like, for example, startup associate. So every clinical trial assistant does startup related activities as part of the job profile. But as part of this specialized function, the startup associate does only startup related activities, and maybe for more number of trials or maybe more complex trials. TMF specialist, so TMF is the trial master file, which is, has all the trial related document which the CTA is expected to compile. So earlier, this was also one of the many activities which the CTA did. Now there are separate divisions and separate hierarchies which to only manage the trial master file. Similarly, for the clinical research associates also, there are many, who get into the monitoring role, and maybe after a couple of years, they feel that they are not comfortable with monitoring, or if they feel they have gained enough experience and they now want to again get into a role which is, more in-house, then they have these other options of becoming a site visit report reviewer. So every CRA, when he or she goes to the site, at the end of the visit, they prepare a report summarizing what they did, what was right, what went wrong. So there is a reviewer role which, reviews this. And there are today, with the advancement of technology, there are also various roles that have come up wherein a monitor or a CRA can remotely look at the hospital data. The hospital uploads all the data onto the electronic portal, and this remote monitor remotely, analyzes or, reviews those documents. Similarly, for the higher hierarchies also, project manager levels also, there are different specialized functions, key account manager, project integration manager, such specialized roles that have come up, and these specialized roles perform only activities related to that particular specific function, not the entire project management. And likewise also for head of operations, there are more specialized domains that have come up. And as I mentioned, depending on the organization, the names might change. Some may say he's a startup specialist, some may say he's a trial expert, and some may say he or she is a trial assistant. She's a CRA, she's a monitor, or she's a senior CRA. So, the terminology may vary, but the core responsibilities nevertheless remain the same. So now coming to the more important part, having looked at, the general idea of what clinical trial is, what are the different functions, what are the different roles, what are their expectations. If you have to get into the clinical research industry, and if you have to gain entry into the field, where do you start and how do you prepare? So one is understand the various roles and requirements. So as I mentioned in the earlier slides, try and see understand what are the different roles. What does each role demand? Then try and map your skill sets, your strengths, and your liking to those requirements. So as I mentioned, if you are someone who prefers to work independently, then it would be good if you apply for roles which require more independent level expertise and functioning. If you are someone who enjoys traveling, then you could be someone who would prefer to apply for the operations related department, which involves traveling to a great extent. So try and map your skills against the role's requirement. Identify and shortlist the target roles. So once you have done this mapping, then depending on the role requirements, try and shortlist which are the target roles. I mean, at the start of the career, you cannot opt for a project manager or a head of operations or a senior CRA role. Majorly for clinical operations, it's a clinical trial assistant role that usually is the entry level. But as I said, there are more specialized functions which are coming up every year, and you may also choose to select from one of those. Work on the gaps. So if you have identified a role which you are interested in, which you have a liking for, you have mapped yourself against that role, but then you come to know that, okay, this role demands X, Y, Z. I have only X and Y. Z is what is missing. So try and work on that Z, which would be be filling the gap, which would be required to make you more suitable for getting selected for that role. Read about the basics to better map yourself to the role. So whenever, as I said, whenever you are appearing for an interview, the interviewer would ask you questions which are more related to what is expected for that role. So try and read more about the basics of that role. No one expects the candidate to have an in-depth knowledge. So even a basic idea of clinical research, the phases, the roles and responsibilities, that is something that is more than good enough. But try and be clear on these basics. Update your CV and know every word of it. So this is something which is, something which is very important, not just if you are applying to clinical research, but regardless of which domain or which function or which industry you're applying to, keep your CV updated. At times we have seen CVs of candidates who apply to us, and there are details which says that they are still pursuing something, they are still part of some and then when we question, they say then that this is an old CV that is actually already completed. That is something that we completed last year. So I mean, keep your CV as updated as possible. I would say if not monthly, at least try and make updates to your CV every quarterly. Even if there are no major updates, that will at least help you to have a look at what you have entered. And I would say that every time you look at the CV, you yourself will be able to identify something which you can update or which you can improve upon. If you have learned something new, if you have done a course, if you have done a certification, or if you have attended some seminars which has helped you, and based on that, if you want to reword something, reword your skill sets, I think go ahead and do that as frequently as possible. And the other thing is, know every word of your CV. Don't put in words or details in your CV which you will not be able to justify at the time of interview. See, the candidate, when we interview candidates, we ask them about themselves. We ask them to tell them about themselves, and the only document that we have to cross check or to ask them more about them is their CV. So when we see a difference in what they are saying and what is there in the CV, that gives a very poor picture about the candidate. So regardless of which industry or which job you're applying for, know every comma, full stop, and every word of your CV. Practice to verbalize your CV. So most of the time, and in almost all interviews that you attend, the interviewer, because he or she does not know you, would want to know about you and want to know what you know, what you don't know, what has been your background. So they would certainly ask you to tell you or speak about yourself. And if you have a good, robust CV, and if you can speak about your CV in a fluent manner, with the right choice of words, that is something that will give you good additional points in terms of assessment at the time of interview. Talk to people from industry. This is something which would be very helpful, because if you are applying for a CTA role, if you are applying for a role in any particular department, if you are applying for, say, any role within business development or within data management, then try and talk to people from that particular function. They would be able to tell you more aspects about the ground level activities about related to those departments. So when you appear for an interview, if you talk, if you use terms, if you tell them that you know what a operations team does, if you tell them what you know about what a pharmacovigilance team does or what a data management team does, that would certainly make you appear more confident and make you appear more well read. This does not mean that you have to talk jargons or you have to explain any concepts, but it will at least tell them that you're familiar with the basics about clinical research. Try mock interviews if possible. So since you will all be a group of students, you would have some seniors, some mentors. So for every role, depending on what the role demands, what the expectations are, try and do mock interviews, and whoever you're working with, be it your friend, your mentor, or your senior, ask them to assess you for the requirement of that particular role, and try and ask for feedback so that you can work upon those aspects when you're before you go for entry. So as I said, for the clinical research, because it is not a formal degree course, there are no predefined technical questions that you would be asked about. Majority of the questions will be related to the basics of clinical research, but because the individual's willingness to learn, the individual's confidence level, the communication skills, and how they want to be, what particular role they are interested in, since these factors are very important at the time of interview. So it is important that you work on these points to make yourself more efficient, or more suitable for the role that you're applying for. And for clinical research, I mean, though I had mentioned about the low, medium, and high, but communication is key. And this is something which would help you in any role, but for clinical research particularly, and more so for clinical operations, this is something which is very, very important. So I would say you should spend quite some time, a significant amount of time, improving your communication. This would not just help you with your initial entry into any industry, but this will also help you in the long run for your growth, or for quickly growing up the ladder within the industry. Some do's and don'ts. So some do's, read about the organization. So if you are applying to a particular pharma company or a contract research organization, do a quick Google search and see what they do, which are the areas they work upon. So, when you're discussing during the interview, I mean, you can, even quote that you're familiar with what their organization does, or if they are saying something about their organization, you can, reflect upon that, and you can affirm that you're aware about this, you had read about this. That will, tell the interviewer that, whoever is assessing you, that, this person has done some groundwork, has put in some efforts. Read about their trial. So in India, it is mandatory that every organization which is doing a clinical trial has to register the details of their clinical trials on a website, which is ctri.gov.in. And this will have the history of all the trials that the organization has conducted, in the history, and the ones which they are currently conducting. So it's good, if you just look at few of those trials, the recent ones that the team is conducting, so that, you're also familiar, and when the discussion happens, you can also quote, and you can tell them that you're familiar, you had read about this. So that will give a positive image about you. Read the job description well. So whenever you're appearing, in all likelihood, your interview would be organized through an HR from the clinical research, HR who looks into the hiring of clinical research. So and ask them for what the job description is, in addition to what role they are offering. But read the job description well, read every word of it to understand what the organization is exactly expecting, so that when you are providing your answers, when you are providing your responses, it can be more aligned to what the job is asking for, and that will, increase your project prospects. Know your CV, know your strengths. We already discussed about this. Read the basics of clinical research and GCP. So regardless of which particular department you apply, knowing GCP is something which is a given. You need not. It's a big 200-page document. Nobody expects the candidate to know every 200 page of it. But there are, multiple websites. Even Wikipedia gives a lot of information on GCP. So before you are appearing for an interview, just quickly just brush up on the GCP, what it says, what the guideline is, and some basics of clinical literature that it says, so that, because these are again common questions that you are likely to be asked during the interview. Say I don't know if you don't. At times, there may be questions that may be asked to you. So instead of, just to try and convince the interviewer, or that you know about clinical research, or you know about that term, don't try to prepare answers or make instant answers. If there is a term that you are not familiar with, it's absolutely fine. You should go ahead and say that you're not familiar with that term, but you would certainly want to, or you're willing to know what that term is. So that would, give a better picture, rather than, putting up some answer which is not correct, or which is grossly wrong, which would, certainly give a more negative picture. So you have to be honest as far as your answers are concerned, because as I said, nobody expects you to know a great deal in clinical research. Be ready to explain why you want that particular role. So this is again a very common question that is asked. So if somebody asks, why do you want to get into clinical operations, or for that matter, why do you want to get into clinical research? So depending on your understanding of clinical research and the different roles and what each role expects, the mapping that you would have done as part of the homework would certainly be helpful in answering this question. You can tell that you have those XYZ capabilities or potential which you think are, as per your understanding, are needed for that particular role, and that way you would be able to contribute more to the organization and contribute more towards your role. So that would certainly give a very positive image. There are interviews where we have seen candidates who have applied for roles within clinical research, but when asked as to why they want to get into clinical research, they say they have a great deal of interest in understanding the drug's chemistry, understanding the mechanism of action of the drug. So these are again, they may be interest areas, and it's good that the candidate has those interest areas, but that in no way helps in, the interviewer to assess how suitable this candidate would be for that particular role. So always try and give answers which are more relevant to the question, more relevant to the role. And lastly, be confident. It's, one thing that we have very commonly seen during the interviews is, because the candidates come from different life sciences background or pharma background, and because they have not done a formal course in clinical research, they feel that they don't know anything about clinical research. So they trying to get nervous. What if somebody asks me what is a phase 3 trial, what is a protocol, and all those related things. So there is absolutely no need to be nervous. There is absolutely no need to be worried about. But whatever you know, whatever you have learned in your course, whatever basic idea you have, and also also have to be sure of what you don't know, and you have to be confident. So whatever you know, whatever you don't know, but at the end of the day, you be confident. There is absolutely no need to be no need to feel nervous or negative or dejected because you are entering into a domain or appearing for a domain which is highly regulated or highly specialized. Some quick goals. Don't try to make answers if you have not read about it. So if somebody asks you what is an informed consent form, maybe you have read about it, maybe you have not read about it. If you have not read, be frank and say that you're not aware about it, but you're willing to know about it. Instead of trying your putting in words or framing words to answer that question. Please don't do that. Don't contradict your CV. If your CV says you wish to pursue or if you wish to pursue a course in some particular domain, or if you say if you wish to grow in the field of clinical research, or if you want to get if you want to get into a particular role within clinical research. So at the time of interview, it wouldn't be nice if you come and say that you want to do a particular course, which is say a course which requires your presence in the lab. Then certainly you are contradicting what you are mentioning in your CV. You may have interest areas across different domains. That is absolutely fine, and that is even encouraged. But when you're applying for a job, when you're applying for an interview, try and stick to what exactly is what you have written in your CV. Don't hide or cover up anything related to past, present, or future if asked. So if there is a gap in your CV, or if there is if there is something related to the grades that you have in your CV, or anything, even if there's an error in your CV which you came to know only during the interview, accept that, be frank about it. Such kind of candidates who are more frank and more honest are more likely to get selected than the ones who may be more efficient but try and hide or cover up. And for the clinical research industry, because it's not a very big industry, it's a very small world, it's quite easy to identify if any such gaps are there, or if the candidate is trying to cover up. So try and be as honest as possible. Do not apply if you're not serious or if you have different career goal in mind. The reason being, one is it will give you a poor image at the time of interview, because there are different ways the interviewers try and assess your seriousness for that particular role, and that is one. And the second thing is, for the clinical research industry particularly, every role, regardless of which function you get into, there is a lot of training and development related effort that the organization has to put or invest in the candidate. Because you are not coming with a formal degree in that particular domain, a lot of training, a lot of coaching, a lot of mentoring has to be done, invested for grooming that candidate and making that candidate capable or independently handling that role. So the organization would certainly not want a candidate who is getting into this field to cover a 6-month or a 1-year gap, post which they have already thought of something else. Obviously, in the long run, you may have different career aspirations, your mind might change. But if you already have something in the near future that you have planned, and which is something different from clinical research, it's better if you if you already stay away. And the other thing is, that would in future, if you have to reapply, if you have say pursued a higher education, and if you want to reapply for that role, there again, it might make the prospects difficult if you have not been very clear or honest in your earlier rounds of assessments. So these are basically some do's and don'ts, and some sample questions. Again, the question list might vary, but these are ideally the questions, and I would also say should be the questions which should be asked for an entry-level candidate. So they basically would want to know, what do you know about clinical research? It's okay if you don't give jargons, if you don't give too much detail. Be simple and precise about what you know. It's only the basics that one expects you to know. Are you familiar with the different phases, with the different regulations? At least you should know what each phase is, what is the objective of each phase, what are the Indian regulations, Indian regulations. So the clinical trial rules by the CDSCO website, you have a PDF copy, you can, and there are loads of presentations on Google that you can glance through. To get research, this is to assess the seriousness of the candidate for that who's applying for that particular role. What are your future career plans and aspirations? This is again related to the earlier question, and to reconfirm the candidate's seriousness in that role. Plans to study further, and there may be specific questions related to the CV. If you've said that you have a prior experience in clinical research, or if you say you have worked on any particular domain or any therapeutic area, or if you've worked on a class of drug, or if you have done a lot of research on a particular drug, then you may be asked questions related to that, and also related to the disease condition or the therapeutic area related to that. Some scenario based questions to try and assess your skills. So say if you are put in a difficult situation where you have to deal with, say, the head of a medical department at a prestigious medical institute, how would you approach that, or how would you deal with that, just to see what is your level of confidence in terms of communication and confidence. Simple questions related to your understanding of basics of human physiology, drugs and diseases, because that is something you should know. Otherwise, you would be totally blank later on when you get into that role. If somebody says what is an anti-diabetic, or what is oncology, what is a cancer, what are the different types of cancer, so the basics of physiology, basics of diseases and drugs, drug class. So those things, a lot of it you must already be aware of because of the curriculum that you have completed, but it's nevertheless always good to revise. And some open-ended questions to assess your knowledge and communication skills, but because, as I mentioned, your communication and skills and confidence form a big bulk of the scoring of when you're applying for any role in clinical research, because communication and people skills are very important for clinical research. So there are also open-ended questions that are asked to assess more on these particular domains. Lastly, in summary, so clinical research is a specialized field involving specialized roles. The reason I say specialized roles and a specialized field, because every domain is unique, and to be frank, at times it is also difficult to jump from one domain to another. So say if I am into clinical operations, a few years down the line, if I decide to get into biostatistics or data management, I may have a good level of knowledge about those divisions, but if I have to get into those fields, it will again be a lot of so that's why every function and every role is unique. So it's important that you select the right role and map yourself with the right function. Freshers who are interested in getting into this field, you're only expected to know the basics. So whatever you read, be confident about it. It is important to know the basics and be correct about it, rather than know half of something and advance it and speak something wrong about it. Communication and teamwork are essential. So as I mentioned, all the functions that I have listed, there is no function within one single function within clinical research which can work in silos. It has to work hand in hand. The teams have to work in hand in hand. So communication and teamwork are very, very essential. So when you're talking something about yourself, when you're exhibiting, talking about your strengths, try and talk about these particular aspects. So that, because this is something which is essential for any candidate in clinical research. The career ladder is pretty much linear, but as I said, there are also new roles that are coming up to provide horizontal growth options and specialized growth options. Interested candidates must identify their interest areas early on, that you can prepare yourself better, and you can also grow up the ladder more efficiently, and you can also perform well better right from day one. Thank you. So that is all I had for sharing with you all today. If you have any particular questions or anything specific that you would want to ask, please let me know.
Thank you so much, Deepak, for this informative session. I'm pretty sure the students would have got a lot of information about clinical research and clinical trials as a career overall. There are a few questions I would like to share with you. Some students have asked if that is fine.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So one question that we have is there are a lot of courses for clinical research. So do they add to your resume considering that you do get training before the job?
Yeah, so the online courses, there are hundreds of online courses. There are a lot of free materials also that are available. The thing is that those courses will help you to get a brief idea about what clinical research is and what it does. I mean, the preliminary idea about the aspects of clinical research. But regardless of that, once you get into but once you get selected for a particular role, you will still have to undergo the exhaustive training and the entire mentoring and getting yourself prepared for that role. So the online courses might help you to some extent in maybe be more familiar with the terms. But one thing which I would also like to add is, if your CV says you have done a course in clinical research, then the questions that are asked during the clinical research will also be slightly more advanced. So if you say I am a fresher, I have not done a course in clinical research, the interviewer would be slightly considerate. But if you say you have done a course in clinical research, then the candidate is expected to know something more about clinical research as compared to someone who has not done a course. So that's how I would put it.
Right. Okay. And we have one more question, Deepak. Uh, is what is the current scenario and scope of clinical trial jobs in India?
So, at the overall industry level, you may be reading a lot about, clinical research coming into India. I mean, clinical trials getting slowed down or becoming, I mean, there are different reviews every now and then, or every few months, you hear different things about clinical research. But the clinical research is something, that is not going to phase out, because till the time we have pharma, till the time we have drugs being developed, the clinical research industry will not phase out. And when even if the number of clinical trials that are done in a particular country, or the type of clinical trial, the numbers might keep changing, but the industry as such will never phase out, and there will always be ample opportunities. And as I said, with these more specialized functions coming up, there are, I would say, more options for individuals to select from. And besides the advantage which India offers, earlier it was only the clinical trial conduct which was being outsourced to Indian pharma companies, Indian contract research organizations. But nowadays, the global pharma companies are also moving their all the back-end related departments or all the support functions to India, and there are the major volume of their resources, clinical research resources, are based in India, even though the headquarters might be in Europe or US. So in terms of jobs, there is no dearth of job. But certainly, as I said, because the role is specialized, because the requirements are specialized, even if there are 1,000 jobs, that does not mean that getting into it will become easier. The candidate will still need to have fulfill the required prerequisite to get selected.
All right. And Deepak, there's one more question, if you don't mind. If
Yeah.
you could please elaborate what is blind trial?
Yeah, blind trial. So, if I am, say, for example, if I am a doctor at a particular hospital site, and if I am going to do if I am interested in doing a clinical trial, and say, for example, if I am a routine prescriber of a particular antibiotic, say, or say, just for example, if I have, say, an antibiotic, amoxicillin, just an arbitrary example. I have been prescribing amoxicillin for ages now, so I know everything about amoxicillin and the safety profile, what dose, how it works, everything. Now, say if a pharma company is developing another variant of an amoxicillin, a different release formulation, or a particular drug which they claim is equivalent to amoxicillin. So when I am being asked to conduct the trial, I will be asked to administer amoxicillin, the one which I have been prescribing, to one set of patients, and to another set of patients, I will be asked to prescribe the variant which the pharma company has developed. Now, what will happen is, and say after administering, if I see an adverse reaction in the patient, which I have so far
Deepak,
not.
not able to hear you. Yeah.
Hello, Is it hello? Is it better now? Hello? Hello?
Yeah, Deepak, I think that's the last question we have had. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for this information. Just give us a moment. Just
Okay, are you able to hear me now?
yeah, perfect, perfect. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So I think you've exceeded your time, but I am not sure if you heard my question clearly. But in short, just in a one-liner, the blinded trials are basically to avoid any kind of bias when you're developing a drug, which you're comparing with an already approved drug, to avoid any kind of bias at the patient's level or at the level of someone who is assessing the data. You try and make the drugs look identical, so that when the investigator is administering the drug to the patient, he does not know whether he's administering the drug which is already commercially available, which is being used as a comparator in the trial, or he or she is administering a drug which is under development. So just to avoid that bias, you blind the drug and make them look similar.
Okay. Thank you so much, Deepak, for this information. I think that's the last question we have had, and the session has been very interactive. Thank you so much, Deepak, and thank you all the viewers and our students for joining us. We'll have two more sessions coming up tomorrow. One is on sales and marketing, and the other is on regulatory affairs on the same YouTube channel. So I hope you guys can join in tomorrow as well. Thank you so much, guys. Thanks, Deepak, once again.
Thank you.